The map lay between the sugar bowl and Arthur's empty chair, its blue property lines too clean for what Eric and Daniel were doing to one another. The West House has the better rental potential, Eric said, resting 2 fingers on its roof as though he had already purchased it. It sleeps 12 if we open the den. It sleeps 8, Margaret said. Comfortably, sure. Daniel pulled the map toward him. Dad always said the East House was mine. He said you liked that one. That's what he meant. Eric gave his brother a patient smile. Then we agree. They looked at Margaret. 6 weeks after burying their father, her sons had divided the lake houses in 11 minutes. Eric cleared his throat. Obviously, Mom, you'd have a room in either place. Whenever you wanted, Daniel added. Margaret studied the narrow parcel below their hands. The caretaker's cottage, the crooked path, the strip of shore where Arthur's old bench faced the water. I'll keep this, she said. Nobody spoke. The cottage and the shore path, she clarified. You take the houses. Eric's relief arrived before his concern. Daniel's did too, though he hid it better. The lawyer, a gray-haired woman named Susan Bell, set down her pen. Margaret, are you sure? Margaret looked at her sons, both waiting for her to make this easy. Yes, she said. I know exactly what I'm keeping. Eric sat back. Well, if that's really what you want. The caretaker's cottage was where the family stored things it could not throw away and did not care enough to keep nearby. Margaret was living there now, among 3 generations of indecision. After the meeting, she carried a box downhill while her sons remained in the lake house kitchen discussing insurance. The box held Arthur's fishing reels, a brass lamp without a shade, and a ceramic rooster Eric had made in a community pottery class 34 years earlier. One wing had broken off before the clay dried. Arthur had kept it anyway. Margaret reached the cottage and shouldered the swollen door open. Inside, late afternoon light fell through the pines and greenish bars. Arthur's tool chest occupied half the sitting room. 2 dining chairs were stacked upside down on the sofa. Winter blankets filled a black garbage bag beneath the window, and somebody had placed a framed watercolor of the lake face first against the wall. She set the box on the floor. Behind her, shoes scuffed the path. Mom? Daniel stood outside with a stack of folded maps and a yellow legal pad. At 46, he still had the same soft, worried eyes that had once made strangers tell him secrets. The effect was less charming when he was using them to ask for something. You left your copies, he said. I only need one. He stepped inside and turned sideways to avoid the lamp. This place is packed. That had escaped me. He laughed, then stopped when she didn't. I can help you clear it out, he said. Good. The chairs on the sofa are yours. Daniel examined them as if she had assigned him 2 strangers. Are they? They came from your house. Oh, Marissa said they were too country. They're wooden chairs beside a lake. You know what I mean. Margaret did. Marissa had a way of making perfectly ordinary things sound as if they had committed a design error. Daniel placed the papers on Arthur's tool chest. I wanted to make sure you didn't feel rushed in there, in the kitchen, with the decision. Margaret watched him carefully. Which part worries you? All of it. The part where you got the house you wanted? His mouth tightened. That's not fair. No, it's accurate. Fair is a different department. He rubbed one thumb over the edge of the legal pad. His wedding ring made a faint scratching sound against the cardboard backing. You'll really be comfortable here? I lived here for 9 years, 40 years ago. Plumbing has improved since then. Some plumbing, he said, glancing toward the kitchen tap. That got a smile out of her, and his shoulders loosened. Daniel had always mistaken the end of a tense moment for resolution. He bent and picked up the ceramic rooster. You kept this? Your father did. I was terrible at pottery. You were terrible at patience. The pottery suffered. Daniel turned the rooster in his hands. For a second he looked less like a man measuring rooms and more like someone who had lost his father and did not know where the loss was supposed to go. Then his phone rang. Marissa, he said, as if Margaret had asked. The cabinet people are up at the house. Already? We're just getting estimates. He put the rooster back in the wrong box and hurried out, leaving the chairs exactly where they were. Through the open door, Margaret watched him climb the path. It ran from the county landing past her cottage, then split near the water, one branch toward each lake house. Arthur had laid the first flat stones himself, and complained about everyone. Over the years, Margaret had reset most of them. At the bend, Daniel nearly collided with Eric coming down. Eric wore his funeral suit trousers with a pale blue golf shirt. He had changed shirts after lunch, but not expressions. His face carried the bright competence that made people believe he had already solved the problem being described. "You got a minute?" he called. Margaret considered lying. Apparently. He ducked inside, took in the crowded room, and frowned. "We've got to do something about this." "We do?" "I mean for you." "Ah, there's no reason you should be living in a storage shed. It's a cottage. Technically, your house is a cottage. We only began calling it a lake house after people became willing to pay more for the word." Eric grinned. He liked her better when she was funny, particularly when the humor did not slow him down. "That's actually what I wanted to talk about. The name. Your name. The rental name. Vale House sounds a little plain. It has been plain for 58 years. I'm thinking Vale Waters." Margaret waited. "Upscale without being stiff," he continued. "Memorable. Good for search. Does the lake know?" He exhaled through his nose. "You're in a mood. My husband died. My sons divided my home, and I own a ceramic rooster with one wing. I'm allowed a range." That landed. Eric looked toward the door, where the water showed in small silver pieces between the trunks. "I miss him too," he said. "I know. He wanted us to keep this place in the family. He wanted many things, most of them before he knew what they cost." Eric's face changed, not much, but enough. Arthur had been dead 6 weeks and was already becoming easier to love. Dead men did not leave damp towels on the floor, forget medication, or promise property that other people had maintained. Eric glanced at Arthur's tool chest. "Is the red ledger in there?" "What red ledger?" "The rental records, expenses, service contacts, all that." "In the desk at the West House." I looked. "No, you open drawers. Looking takes longer." He smiled again. "Could you show me?" Margaret looked at the box she had carried down the hill. Her lower back pulsed beneath her waistband. "Tomorrow. It'll take 2 seconds, then you should find it quickly." For once, Eric did not know whether she was joking. The next morning, Margaret woke at 5:47 because Arthur was not breathing beside her. That was how it happened now. Her body woke first, alert to the missing sound, and only afterward remembered there was no emergency left to solve. She lay beneath the sloped ceiling and listened to rain tap the metal vent above the stove. The bedroom smelled faintly of cedar and the lavender hand cream Lena Brooks had brought after the funeral. Arthur had hated lavender. Margaret had put it on thick before bed. By 7, she was outside in rubber boots, clearing pine needles from the path's shallow drainage channel with a garden trowel. Water sheeted down from the road, found the ditch, and turned toward the lake as it was supposed to. A white van came around the bend and stopped beside her. A man leaned across the passenger seat. "East Vale House?" "Up the path, then right." "Can I drive down?" "No." He looked at the muddy incline. Mrs. Vale said we could unload by the side entrance. "Which Mrs. Vale?" He checked his phone. "Marissa." Margaret wiped rain from her cheek with the back of her glove. "You can unload at the upper parking pad. The path isn't a road. I've got cabinets. So does the house. That's why they hired you." He gave her a reluctant smile. "You, Margaret? Depends who's asking. Marissa said there might be a Margaret. There might be." Margaret stepped aside and pointed him uphill. By 10, cabinet boxes lined Daniel's porch. The old pine cupboards had already been removed and stacked in the wet grass. Margaret found Marissa in the kitchen, holding 2 brass handles against a paint sample. Marissa was 44, narrow and energetic, with dark hair pinned up using a pencil. She kissed Margaret's cheek and immediately said, "Don't panic. That greeting has never improved a situation. We're not doing anything structural." Margaret looked at the exposed wall where the cupboards had been. A pale rectangle showed around the old wallpaper, clean as skin beneath a bandage. Daniel came in carrying a box. "Hey, Mom, your chairs are still in my sitting room." "I know. Sorry. Today got away from us. It's 10 in the morning." Marissa put down the paint card. "You don't want those cabinets, do you? They're solid, but they make everything feel so dark." Margaret opened one cupboard door. Inside, pencil marks recorded the years Arthur had changed shelf heights and then changed them back. "They could go in my cottage," she said. The contractor paused in the doorway. "Already pulled the backs off too." Marissa winced. "I wish you'd said something. I found out when a man with cabinets tried to drive across my path." "Our path," Daniel said automatically. The room went quiet. Rain ticked against the bare windows. Somewhere inside the wall, a loosened nail fell with a small metallic sound. Daniel shifted the box against his hip. I meant the family path. Margaret looked at him. Marissa stepped in brightly. Of course, that's what he meant. The old cupboard stood in the yard, taking rain into their joints. Margaret went outside and dragged a blue tarp over them by herself. Daniel followed after a moment, but not before setting down his box where it would stay dry. That afternoon, Eric called 3 times. Margaret let the first 2 calls ring. On the third, she answered because she thought someone might be hurt. "Where's the ledger?" he asked. "In the desk." "It's not." "Bottom drawer, underneath the appliance manuals." A drawer banged through the phone. Papers rustled. "Got it," Eric said. "Okay, I need the cleaner's number. It's in the ledger." "Which page?" "The one marked cleaning." He sighed. "Mom, could you come up here? I'm trying to get the listing live tonight." Margaret stood outside her cottage beneath the dripping eaves. At her feet, rainwater moved cleanly through the channel she had opened. Beyond the pines, the 2 lake houses rose warm and bright against the gray shore, already filling with other people's plans. On the path beside her sat Daniel's wooden chairs, delivered at last and left uncovered. "Not tonight," she said. There was a pause. "What are you doing?" Margaret looked through her cottage window at Arthur's boxes, the brass lamp, the face-down painting, and the one-winged rooster. "I'm finding out what belongs to me," she said, and ended the call. For 20 minutes, Margaret left the chairs in the rain. It was a petty thing, and she knew it. The chairs were innocent. They had supported people faithfully for decades, and had not once suggested she should be grateful for whatever room her sons allowed her. Finally, she carried them under the eaves, one at a time, and sent Daniel a photograph. "Your chairs are here. Please collect by Friday." 3 dots appeared beneath the message, vanished, and reappeared. "Sorry, I'll get them tomorrow." Margaret set her phone face down. Tomorrow was the most crowded day in Daniel's calendar. It contained every task he regretted agreeing to, and most apologies he hoped would expire. She spent the rest of the afternoon making space around Arthur's desk. It was a scarred oak thing he had bought from the county offices when they renovated in 1989. Its bottom drawer stuck in humid weather, and the center drawer smelled of pencils, even though nobody had kept pencils in it for years. Margaret found property tax receipts, warranties for appliances they no longer owned, and an envelope labeled "Good Screws" in Arthur's handwriting. It contained 7 bad screws and a small key she didn't recognize. She almost laughed. That was the shape grief took when nobody was watching. Not tears. A key in an envelope that made her want to turn around and ask a dead man why he had kept it. She sat in his desk chair until the rain softened. At 4, someone knocked twice on the doorframe and called. Decent people announced themselves. Lena Brooks stepped inside, carrying 2 paper cups and a bakery bag. She was 68, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and dressed in a red raincoat that made the entire cottage look less gloomy. She had retired from the hospital kitchen in May and still moved with the efficient impatience of someone accustomed to feeding 300 people before noon. "I wasn't sure I qualified," Margaret said. "You don't, but I brought coffee anyway." Lena navigated the boxes without asking whether she should help. That was one of the reasons Margaret liked her. Help offered too quickly could feel like an opinion. She passed Margaret a cup and opened the bakery bag. Blueberry scone. They called it rustic, which means it fell apart. "I'm living rustic now. You're living condemned by clutter." Different category. They ate at the tiny kitchen table. Rain slid from the pine branches outside and struck the metal roof in fat, uneven drops. Lena nodded toward the uphill houses. "I saw cabinet men. So did the path." "Marissa? Who else would remove cupboards before locating the tea kettle?" "Eric. Eric would remove the tea kettle and rent it back to you." Margaret laughed hard enough to spill coffee on her hand. Lena waited until she had wiped it up. "How did the dividing go?" "Quickly." "That sounds bad. They each got what they came for." "And you?" Margaret looked around the cottage. "I got what they didn't." Lena picked a loose blueberry from the bag. "That wasn't my question." "No?" It had not been Susan Bell's question either, though Susan had known better than to press. Margaret had taken less cash, so the houses would not have to be sold or mortgaged to settle Arthur's share. It was a decision she had made before Eric arrived with projections, and Daniel arrived with memories. She could have forced a sale. She did not want to be the reason the family shore vanished into someone else's portfolio. She had not expected gratitude. At least, that was what she told herself. Lena finished her coffee and rose. "Walk with me. It's wet. Lake's been wet for years." They followed the path downhill. The rain had polished the roots black and deepened the smell of pine bark. Margaret's drainage channel carried a steady brown ribbon beside them. At the fork, Lena stopped. A white wooden sign had been fastened to a maple tree. "Vale Waters," it said in navy letters. An arrow pointed toward Eric's house. Margaret stared at the fresh screws. "He works fast," Lena said. "He had a sign before he had a cleaner. Maybe the sign changes sheets." The old path marker had been a gray board with West House burned into it by Arthur, using a soldering iron and vocabulary Margaret had not known he possessed. It lay behind the tree in wet leaves. She picked it up. "Want me to yank the new one down?" Lena asked. "It's his tree." "Shame." Margaret brushed dirt from Arthur's crooked letters. "The arrow is wrong." Lena looked again. It was. The sign pointed along the shore branch that crossed Margaret's parcel and passed directly in front of her cottage. Eric's parking area was reached from the upper drive in the opposite direction. "Maybe he means for people to walk," Lena said. "He means for them to see the water before they see the house." Margaret carried the old marker back with her. Eric's listing appeared online that evening. She would not have known if Lena had not sent the link with the message, "He has photographed your bench's good side." Margaret opened it on her phone. The first image showed the West House at sunset, all amber windows and dark roof lines. Eric had brightened the sky until the lake looked tropical. The second showed the screened porch. The third was Margaret's path, photographed from low to the ground, so the flat stones appeared to lead straight into the water. "Private shore access," the caption said. Another photograph showed Arthur's bench beneath the pines. A peaceful place to reconnect. Margaret enlarged the image. Someone had moved Arthur's dented metal watering can out of the frame, but had missed his blue work glove beneath the bench. Just the fingers showed, reaching from the leaves. She closed the listing. At 8, Eric texted, "Found Sheila's number, all good, at 8:12. Quick question. What do we usually charge for cleaning?" At 8:27. "Also, do we have extra propane tanks?" Margaret went to bed without answering. Daniel retrieved the chairs on Saturday, one day late, and wearing the expression of a man arriving early. "Busy week," he said. It was 4 days. Exactly. He carried the first chair up the path, returned for the second, and found Margaret kneeling beside the old marker with a jar of exterior varnish. "Dad made that," he said. "He did. I forgot about it." Margaret ran the brush over the burned letters. The wood darkened beneath the bristles. "Eric's sign looks nice," Daniel offered carefully. "The arrow sends his guests across my parcel. They'd be walking to the lake anyway." "Would they?" Daniel shifted his grip on the chair back. "I don't know. Probably." "Then he should probably ask." "He's excited, Mom. You know how he gets when he has a project. I know how everyone gets when I'm expected to absorb the project." Daniel put the chair down. "That's not what I'm doing. You left furniture outside my house. I came back for it, after I gave you a deadline." He stared at her, not angry yet, but approaching it. "You've never cared about things like that before." The sentence landed between them with more honesty than he intended. Margaret set the brush across the mouth of the jar. "That's true." Daniel waited for the rest. When none came, he picked up the chair. "We're having dinner tomorrow," he said. "Come up around 6. Is this dinner or a meeting with food?" "Dinner." "Will Eric be there?" "He has to eat too." "Then it's a meeting." But she went. Marissa had cooked salmon with lemon slices arranged so neatly they looked attached by a machine. The dining table was new, pale wood with black metal legs. Margaret's old oak table had been moved to the porch, where 3 paint cans sat on it. Eric brought wine and spent 10 minutes explaining its label. He poured Margaret a glass, Daniel half a glass, and himself enough to finish the bottle mathematically. "To keeping it in the family," he said. They raised their glasses. Margaret drank. The wine was good, which irritated her. Marissa sat beside Daniel and kept touching his forearm when she wanted him to say something. After the second touch, he put down his fork. "We've been thinking about your setup," he began. Margaret looked at the salmon. "My setup." "The cottage," Marissa said. "It needs work. It has needed work since 1978. That's part of its charm." Eric smiled. "You can't charm mold. There's no mold. There's definitely a smell. That's cedar. Very aggressive cedar." Daniel gave Eric a warning look. We just want you to know the offer stands. You can stay here whenever you want. We'll keep the downstairs room flexible." Marissa nodded. "It could be yours most of the time." "Most?" Margaret set down her fork. "What happens the rest of the time?" "Nothing," Daniel said too quickly. "We might have friends," Marissa said, "or guests. We're still figuring out how we'll use the house. And my room. Nobody said it wouldn't be your room, just that I may not be in it." Eric leaned back. "Mom, nobody's throwing you out. You've got options. That's all he's saying." Margaret looked toward the sideboard for the blue stoneware pitcher Arthur had used every summer. It was gone. In its place stood a glass vase holding 3 bare branches. "Where are the dishes?" she asked. Marissa blinked. "What dishes?" "The blue set, the green bowls, all the mismatched mugs." "Oh, boxes in the mudroom. I was going to ask what you wanted. You already packed them. We needed the cupboards empty." Eric cut into his salmon. "They were pretty beat up." "Dishes don't get beat up," Margaret said. "They get used." Marissa's cheeks colored. "I haven't thrown anything away." Daniel touched her arm this time. "Nobody's saying you did." The conversation moved on without Margaret's permission. Eric discussed bookings. 2 weekends had already filled. One couple was coming the following Thursday, which meant Sheila needed the house by noon, and the propane tanks had to be checked. "Speaking of which," Eric said, "could you let her in, Mom?" Margaret looked at him. "Thursday morning. She can't come until 9, and I've got a client call. Where will you be?" "In the city." "So will she." Eric smiled as if she had made a joke for his benefit. "Sheila's driving out. Then give her a key. I only have the 2 sets. You can make a third. I'm not going to get back before Wednesday night. There's a hardware store in the city." The smile left his face. Daniel cleared his throat. "I can let her in." "I thought you had the plumber," Marissa said. "I can move him." "The plumber who took 3 weeks to schedule?" Margaret lifted her wine. "This is an excellent meeting." Eric put down his fork. "It's 1 door, Mom." "Yes." "You'll be right there." "Yes." "So, what's the issue?" Margaret could have named 38 years of issues. She could have told him how often right there had meant available, how availability had hardened into duty, and how duty became invisible once performed often enough. Instead, she said, "Ask me as if my time belongs to me." Eric stared at her. Marissa focused on the lemon slice on her plate. Daniel rubbed his wedding ring with his thumb. Finally, Eric said stiffly, "Would you please let Sheila into the house Thursday morning?" "I have plans Thursday morning." "What plans?" Margaret took another sip of wine. Outside, rainwater dripped from the roof onto the path she had kept clear for all of them. "Mine," she said. Eric looked as if he had bitten into a fishbone. Margaret finished her wine, thanked Marissa for dinner, and asked Daniel to help carry the boxed dishes down to the cottage. "All of them?" Marissa said. "You said you wanted them gone. I said I wanted to know what you wanted. I want them gone." Eric remained at the table while Daniel and Marissa brought 6 boxes from the mudroom. The rain had stopped, but the cardboard bottoms were already soft from sitting on damp concrete. Margaret rejected Daniel's suggestion that they leave everything until morning. He found a wheelbarrow beside the shed, loaded 3 boxes, then put a folded towel over them as protection against weather that had passed. The path was slippery. Daniel leaned backward against the weight, his dress shoes sliding on the wet stones. "You could have changed shoes," Margaret said. "I didn't expect manual labor with salmon. Your father never did either." At the cottage, they arranged the boxes along the kitchen wall. Daniel looked around, found nowhere sensible for the last one, and placed it on a chair. "You can't live like this," he said. "Watch me. I mean with all the boxes. Most of them came from your houses." "I know." He pressed his palms together, thinking. "We should rent a dumpster." Margaret looked at the box marked Arthur Office. "Go home, Daniel." His face softened. "I wasn't talking about Dad's things. You were talking about everything without knowing what was in it. I'm trying to help. Then take the wheelbarrow back before Marissa reports it missing." He went, but slowly enough to communicate injury. In the morning, Lena arrived with cinnamon rolls and no sympathy for the condition of Margaret's kitchen. "You won," she said, looking at the dish boxes. "This is winning? You got free dishes. They were already mine. That's the spirit. Have a roll." They unpacked blue plates, green soup bowls, 4 wine glasses with cloudy stems, and enough mismatched mugs to host a convention of people who disliked one another. Margaret washed each piece before putting it away. Lena dried, holding every chipped cup up to the light, as if appraising diamonds. "This one leaks," she said. "It's a pencil cup. It has a lighthouse on it. Pencils enjoy coastal themes." Near the bottom of the fourth box, Margaret found Arthur's brown coffee mug. It was heavy diner china, with a faded moose on one side and a hairline crack near the handle. She had poured coffee into it every morning of his last year, then carried it untouched to the sink when he no longer remembered asking for it. Lena reached for the next dish and let Margaret hold the mug. After a while, she said, "So what are your important plans Thursday? I was hoping you had some." Lena's laugh startled a chickadee from the windowsill. "You told him no before inventing the plans?" "I told him I had plans. Planning to avoid Eric is a plan. What if I'm busy? Then I'll avoid you too." Margaret placed Arthur's mug on the highest shelf, not hidden, but beyond casual reach. They cleared one whole box for donation and filled another with things that belonged to Eric or Daniel. A silver cocktail shaker went to Eric. A set of ceramic corn holders went to Daniel because Marissa hated them. Margaret kept the blue pitcher and the green bowls. By noon, a narrow path had opened between the kitchen and the sitting room. Lena stood in it, hands on hips. There. Now, if the place catches fire, you can escape without climbing over Christmas. Christmas is in the bedroom. Of course it is. Margaret looked toward the water-stained plaster above the front window. The mark had been there when she and Arthur moved out of the cottage. It was darker now, shaped like a continent no mapmaker would claim. "Do you still see Cal Mercer?" she asked. "I saw him Tuesday. He was buying screws and insulting the price of lumber. Is he working?" "Cal will be working at his own funeral." "Why?" "I need someone to look at the roof." Lena's eyebrows rose. "Arthur always said he could handle that roof. Arthur said many things from the ground." Cal answered Margaret's call on the fourth ring. His voice was deeper than she remembered, and no warmer. "I left a message after the funeral," he said. "I heard it. You didn't call back. I'm calling now." "That's not the same thing?" "No." There was a pause in which another person might have rushed to excuse her. Cal said, "What's broken?" He arrived Thursday at 8:30 in an old green pickup with one silver door. He had grown a white beard since Margaret last saw him, but it did not make him look soft. He wore square glasses, a canvas coat, and a knit cap advertising a marina that had closed 15 years ago. Margaret met him outside. "You still have that truck," she said. "Most of it." He looked past her at the cottage, then up at the roofline. "You living here?" "Yes." "On purpose?" "That depends what you find." Cal made no speech about Arthur. He walked the exterior first, pressing trim with the flat end of a screwdriver and grunting at gutters. Margaret followed until he told her to stop standing under the ladder. "I've stood under ladders before. That doesn't improve this one. You sound like Arthur." "No, Arthur would tell you it was safe while dropping a hammer." She stepped back. Cal climbed, inspected the flashing, and came down with pine needles on his shoulders. "Roof's not your problem yet. Window trim is. Backstep's trying to kill you. Bathroom vent is mostly decorative." "How much?" "I haven't looked inside. You've already criticized half the building. The other half may cost more." His estimate when he finished was neither kind nor outrageous. He wrote each job on a lined yellow sheet, separating urgent repairs from improvements Margaret could postpone. "You don't need a new roof," he said. "Anybody tells you otherwise, send them to me." "Why?" "I like meeting liars." Margaret studied the total. She had savings, but spending money on the cottage made her throat tighten. For years, every repair decision had been measured against both lake houses, winter taxes, Arthur's medications, and what Eric or Daniel might need. Even now, some part of her waited for permission from a committee that did not know it existed. "Do the step, window trim, and bathroom vent," she said. "I'll decide on the rest later." Cal folded the estimate once. "Deposit is 20%. You used to let Arthur pay when the rentals filled." "I used to be stupid." Margaret looked at him. He shrugged. "Grief doesn't make carpentry free." To her surprise, she liked him for saying it. A car horn sounded up by the road. Sheila Owens came down the path carrying a canvas cleaning bag and a ring of keys large enough for a jail. She was in her late 50s, with bleached hair tied in a knot and reading glasses hanging from a pink cord. "You must be Margaret," she said. "Eric told me you'd open up." Margaret felt Cal glance at her. "I told Eric I had plans." Sheila lifted both hands. "Don't shoot the messenger. I told him I needed a key. Did he say he'd get one made? He said you lived right here." "Of course he had." Margaret still carried the West House key. It was on her ring beside the cottage key and the brass tag Arthur had stamped with a crooked W. Eric knew she had it because Margaret had opened that house for cleaners, repairmen, guests, and careless relatives for nearly 4 decades. She could send Sheila away. The woman had driven 40 minutes and was paid by the job. Eric would lose nothing except time. Sheila would lose money. Margaret took out the key. "This is the last time," she said. Sheila nodded too readily. "Absolutely." Cal's expression did not change, which was worse than a comment. They walked up together. Eric's new sign shone against the wet maple. Sheila followed its arrow toward the water. "The house is the other way," Margaret said. Sheila stopped. "Then why does it point there?" Atmosphere. Inside, the West House smelled of lemon paint and Arthur's old fireplace. Eric had moved the living room furniture to face the windows and replaced family photographs with framed prints of sailboats. A bowl of green apples sat on the dining table. Margaret touched one. Plastic. Sheila opened a closet and frowned. "Where are the sheets?" "Upstairs, linen cupboard." Eric said everything would be laid out. Eric says things in the future tense and expects women to make them past tense. Sheila barked a laugh, then covered it with a cough. Her worksheet listed 3 bathrooms. The house had 4. The turnover time allowed was 4 hours, including laundry, though the old washer took 53 minutes per load and shuddered across the floor during the spin cycle. "You'll need to discuss the price with him," Margaret said. "What did you used to pay?" Margaret knew exactly. She also knew which beds required deep pocket sheets, where the vacuum belt slipped, and how to open the upstairs window without pulling the latch off. "I'm not managing the house," she said. "I'm just asking what he paid before. The records are in his red ledger." Sheila studied her for a second, then nodded. "Understood." Outside, Cal was sitting on the cottage step, tightening a loose screw in his glasses. "You opened the door," he said. "Sheila shouldn't lose a morning because my son didn't make a key. Didn't say she should. You had a face." "I always have a face." Margaret wrote him a deposit check at the kitchen table. At 11:15, Eric called. "Sheila says the rate is higher than last season. Sheila should know her rate. She says Dad paid extra for laundry. He did. That's not in the ledger. It is." I looked. Margaret closed her eyes. Blue tab marked housekeeping. Papers flipped in the background. "Oh," Eric said. "Right." She waited. "So, can you tell her it's the same arrangement?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it isn't. Arthur is dead. I'm not running your rental. You and Sheila need your own arrangement." Eric went silent long enough for Margaret to hear a car horn on his end. "Fine," he said. "I'll handle it." At 3, Daniel knocked and placed a small paper bag on her table. Inside were the ceramic corn holders. Marissa said, "These were yours. They're yours. They're shaped like corn. That's why they hold corn." He looked exhausted. There was white plaster dust in his hair and a red mark along his wrist. "The plumber found galvanized pipe behind the shower," he said. "I know. You knew? I told you not to open that wall until you budgeted for pipe. You said the plumbing was old. What did you think that meant?" Daniel sat down without being invited. "Marissa thinks you're angry with her." "I'm not. That'll make her feel better. I'm tired of discovering decisions after they've been made." He rubbed the red mark. "We're trying to make the house ours. It is yours. You don't say that like it's a good thing." Margaret put the corn holders back in the bag. "I made it easy for you to have that house. I did not agree to pretend it cost you nothing." Daniel looked toward Arthur's tool chest. "Nobody thinks it cost nothing. Your brother renamed his before the ground settled over your father. That's Eric. Yes. Everyone has always found that sentence useful." Daniel's phone buzzed. He checked it but stayed seated. "I'll talk to him about the sign," he said. "Don't. You want it moved. I want him to hear me when I tell him." Daniel gave a tired nod and left the corn holders behind. The first rental guests arrived the following afternoon in a black SUV. Margaret was sanding the old West House marker at a folding table outside when she heard wheels bumping over roots. A man and woman came down the shore path pulling hard-sided suitcases. They were perhaps 60, dressed for a resort, and already uncertain. "Excuse me," the woman called. "Is this Vale Waters?" Margaret looked at Eric's arrow above them, then at their shoes sinking into the soft earth. "No," she said. "This is my home." The woman turned to her companion. "I told you the little cottage wasn't in the pictures." "The path was," he said. He showed Margaret the listing on his phone. Beneath the photograph of Arthur's bench, Eric had added a new line. Your private shore begins just steps from the door. Margaret looked past them at the actual house, barely visible uphill through the pines. Then she looked at the unfinished marker beneath her hand. It seems, she said, my son has rented you a sentence. The woman laughed first, though she did not seem sure Margaret was joking. Her name was Diane Harris. Her companion was her husband, Paul, who had packed a canvas hat for the lake and was now carrying it in his hand like evidence of poor judgment. We followed the sign, Diane said. Everybody does. It's a very confident sign. Paul looked uphill. Can we get to the house this way? Yes, but your car can't. The parking area is off the upper drive. The email said to park near the blue sign. Margaret glanced at Eric's navy and white masterpiece. That's technically blue. They had unloaded both suitcases, a case of wine, and a soft cooler. Their vehicle remained beside the county landing with 2 wheels in the mud. Margaret could have sent them back up alone. Instead, she showed Paul where the ground was firm enough to turn around and directed Diane toward the west house by the shortest branch. I'm sorry, Diane said. We thought you were with the property. I was with it for 38 years. Oh, now I'm beside it. Diane looked as if she wanted to ask what that meant, but had correctly judged the path too steep for family history. The lockbox code worked. The key inside did not. Paul tried it 6 times, each with increasing moral conviction. Margaret stood on the porch and watched him turn the wrong key upside down. That's for the shed, she said. How can you tell? Arthur wrapped tape around it because the shed key and house key looked alike. There was no tape on the other key because there was no other key. Paul held up the empty lockbox. Maybe we're supposed to climb through a window. I wouldn't. The screens cost more than Eric thinks. She used her own key again. Inside, the house was clean and cold. Sheila had left the kitchen immaculate, with a folded towel shaped like a fan beside the sink. The plastic apples remained on the table. Eric had also placed a white binder on the counter marked, Welcome to Vale Waters. Diane opened it. The first page showed the wireless password. The second listed restaurants. The third said, For assistance during your stay, contact your host, followed by Eric's number in bold. Margaret tapped it. Call your host. Tell him the house key is missing. We're in now, Paul said. You'll want to get in again. Diane made the call. Eric answered quickly and sounded delighted until she explained the key. Margaret could hear his voice from 3 feet away. My mother's right there, he said. She can get you settled. Diane's eyes moved to Margaret. Put him on speaker, Margaret said. After a fumbling second, Eric's voice filled the kitchen. Mom, can you give them your key for the weekend? I'll have another made Monday. No. A silence followed. Then what are they supposed to do? Your guests are asking. Paul found the plastic apples unusually interesting. Eric lowered his voice, apparently forgetting the speaker. Could we not do this in front of them? We aren't in front of them. We're in their rental. I'll drive out tonight. Good. I've got a dinner. So do they. Another silence. Then Eric said, I'll figure it out, and ended the call. Diane set the phone down with care. We really don't want to cause trouble. You didn't. Margaret showed them how to lock the door from inside, recommended a restaurant that served dinner past 8, and carried nothing when she left. At the cottage, Cal had removed the rotten board from the back step. He was crouched over a replacement, marking it with a carpenter's square. You're working late, she said. You're running a hotel. I opened a door. How many times? Twice. He gave her a look over his glasses. The first was for Sheila. Then you're running housekeeping and reception. I refused to give them my key. Cal made a small approving grunt. I don't require grading, Margaret said. Good. I charge extra. She showed him the old West House marker. He ran his thumb over Arthur's burned lettering. He made this the day he bought that soldering iron, Cal said. He claimed it was a wood-burning kit. He burned his sleeve. He told me that hole came from welding. Arthur never welded in that shirt. There was affection in Cal's voice, but no polishing. Margaret had forgotten how restful it could be to speak with someone who missed Arthur without turning him into a saint. The lettering's still good, Cal said. Wood split near the end. I can brace it from behind. I can pay you. For 5 minutes? You charged Arthur for 10. Arthur talked through the first 5. She left the marker with him. Eric arrived at 7:20 carrying a grocery bag and 2 newly cut keys. By then, the Harrises had gone to dinner. Margaret was sweeping sawdust from the cottage step. Where are they? He asked. living independently. He looked at Cal's truck. Who's here? Cal Mercer. For what? Repairs. Eric glanced up at the cottage roof. You should have talked to us first. Margaret leaned on the broom. Why? We know contractors. You know websites. I know enough to make sure you're not getting overcharged. Cal gave me an itemized estimate. Did you get another bid? Did you? For what? Anything you've done to that house. His jaw shifted. He looked toward the west house, where the windows remained dark. I drove 2 hours because you wouldn't loan them a key. You drove 2 hours because you failed to leave one. They're nice people. I don't want them walking into family tension. Then stop renting them a path through it. Eric closed his eyes briefly. Here we go. Your listing calls my shore private. Your sign sends strangers past my front door. They have always had access to the lake. Guests had access because we allowed it. You allowed it, your father and I'm his son. That is a relationship, not permission. Eric shifted the grocery bag to his other hand. A bottle knocked softly against a jar inside. What do you want me to do? Tell guests the lake is off limits? I want you to tell the truth. The house has access to the public landing. The shore path is shared by permission. The bench is not part of the rental. His expression sharpened. Shared with who? With people I know. So strangers from Lena's walking group are fine, but paying guests are a problem. They aren't strangers to me. That's convenient. No, Eric, it's community. Convenience is calling your mother because you forgot a key. Cal saw stop behind the cottage. Neither of them looked toward it. Eric let out a breath. I'll change the arrow. Tonight. It's getting dark. You have 2 hours of driving left. Those are darker. For 1 second she thought he might refuse. Then he set the grocery bag on the path, took a screwdriver from his car, and repositioned the sign toward the upper drive. He did it angrily but correctly. When he finished, he brought the bag to the west house, left a key in the lockbox, and waited for the Harrises to return. Margaret saw his headlights leave shortly before 10. At 10:15, Diane and Paul walked down the shore path, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Margaret was on her porch in a cardigan, reading beneath the yellow wall light. They stopped when they saw her. We wanted to look at the water, Diane said. You can. Your son said the bench was available. Margaret looked toward Arthur's bench. Cal had set the repaired marker across it to dry, so Paul moved the board carefully to the ground. I'd rather you didn't move that, Margaret said. He froze. Sorry, I'm repairing it. Diane touched his arm. We can go. The apology in her face made Margaret feel ungenerous. They had paid for a weekend by a lake. They had not invented the listing or installed the sign. You can sit, she said. Just put the marker back when you're done. They thanked her too warmly. From her porch, Margaret could hear only pieces of their conversation. A restaurant, a sister in Arizona, whether the clouds would clear by morning, ordinary things. Their wine glasses caught the moon whenever they lifted them. Arthur's bench had never been private. Neighbors used it, hikers used it, and once a delivery driver had eaten an entire meatball sandwich there while Margaret watched from the kitchen. The difference was not their presence. It was Eric selling the right to it without asking. Cal returned Monday morning with cedar boards, 2 new vents, and Arthur's marker reinforced from behind. You varnished it, Margaret said. You missed a corner. She examined the smooth wood. You could have told me. You'd have argued. I'm arguing now. Save time. He replaced the back step first. Margaret tried to carry the old board toward his truck, caught her foot on a box, and struck her shoulder against the doorframe. Cal took the board from her. I had it. You had the floor coming at you. I tripped. That's what falling starts as. She pressed her lips together. He carried the board outside, then came back and looked at the path she had cleared through the sitting room. You need this stuff moved before I do the window. I'm sorting it. At this rate, the window will rot faster. It took 38 years to accumulate, and it's hoping for 38 more. Margaret looked at Arthur's tool chest. My sons need time to decide what they want. Give them a date. They're busy. So are termites. She disliked being told something she already knew, especially when it was true. Daniel arrived at noon looking for a pipe wrench. Dad kept the big one here, he said, opening the tool chest before Margaret answered. Cal looked up from the window trim. What size pipe? 1/2-inch galvanized. Then you want the 18-inch wrench. Daniel found it beneath a coil of electrical cord. Thanks. Margaret held out her hand. He gave her the wrench, confused. When will you bring it back? After the plumber finishes. When? Tomorrow, probably. She waited. Tuesday, he said. She gave it back. Daniel glanced between her and Cal. You're keeping track of tools now? I'm keeping track of mine. They were Dad's. And now, they're in my house. Something passed over Daniel's face. Not anger exactly. Displacement. He had walked into a room where another man knew which wrench to use, and his mother had not asked his approval for the work. How much is all this costing? He asked. Enough. You should let us help. Would it be help or an investment? What's that supposed to mean? Cal quietly picked up his saw and carried it outside. Margaret wished he had stayed. Then she was ashamed of wishing for a witness. It means I don't want you repairing my house and later explaining that it gives you a vote. Daniel's face reddened. You think everything we do has some ugly motive now. No, I think motives get ugly when nobody names them. He tucked the wrench under his arm. You've changed. Margaret looked at the repaired step, the open window, and the boxes crowding her walls. I'm trying to. Daniel left without saying goodbye. That evening, Margaret typed 2 messages. To Eric, she wrote, remove the photographs of my cottage, bench, and shore path from your rental listing by Wednesday. Describe lake access accurately. To both sons, she wrote, anything stored in my cottage must be collected by the 1st of next month. Unclaimed items will be mine to keep, sell, or give away. Daniel responded first. Are you serious? Eric called 30 seconds later. Margaret turned off her phone. Outside, she and Cal fastened the restored West House marker at the fork. Beneath it, Margaret added a smaller board she had painted herself. Private residence, it said, with an arrow pointing toward her cottage. The words looked severe against the pines. She stood back, brush still in her hand. Cal studied the signs. They'll understand. That isn't the same as liking it? No. Margaret watched the last light move across the water. For most of her life, she had made other people comfortable before deciding whether she was comfortable herself. The new sign did not feel like victory. It felt like the first unpleasant sound of a door finally closing. The door did not close neatly. At 6:40 the next morning, Eric sent a message long enough to require scrolling. He used phrases such as reasonable expectations, historic family use, and unnecessary hostility. At the end, he wrote, I'll adjust the listing, but I'm not going to mislead people into thinking there's no lake access. Margaret replied, good. Daniel sent nothing. At 9, Cal found the pipe wrench on the cottage step. He brought it back, Margaret said. Left it in the dew. He brought it near. Cal wiped the metal with a rag and returned it to Arthur's chest. By noon, Eric had removed the photograph of the cottage. The photograph of the shore path remained, as did Arthur's bench. The caption now read, direct access to the lake by a charming shared path. It was an improvement in the way a smaller leak was an improvement. Margaret decided not to call him. She was learning that every boundary did not require a speech after it. Some could simply remain where she put them. Marissa came down that afternoon wearing work pants, old sneakers, and a blue scarf tied around her hair. She carried a roll of packing tape. I'm here for Daniel's things, she said. He sent you? He doesn't know I'm here. That sounds peaceful. I thought it might be. They began with the 2 dining chairs. Marissa turned one over and inspected the underside. These aren't ours. They came from the East House. They came with the East House. Margaret looked at her. Marissa winced. That sounded bad. It sounded accurate. I mean, they were there when we took possession. You make it sound like a bank transfer. That's what the lawyer called it. Susan also called Eric's sports car a depreciating asset. You don't hear him introducing it that way. Marissa laughed despite herself. The sound loosened something in the room. They carried the chairs outside and stacked them beside Marissa's station wagon. Then Margaret gave her the box containing the ceramic corn holders, 3 framed prints, a brass fireplace brush, and a fondue pot Arthur had bought during a brief period of enthusiasm for melted cheese. Marissa held up the pot. This is Eric's. He says it's Daniel's. On what evidence? Daniel ate more fondue. That's not ownership. That's appetite. They set it in a third pile. For the next hour, they sorted without discussing the lake houses. Marissa was decisive about trash, but unexpectedly sentimental about linens. She kept a faded table runner because Arthur had spilled cranberry sauce on it one Thanksgiving and insisted the stain looked like Michigan. He was impossible, she said fondly. He worked at it. Near the back wall, Marissa uncovered the face-down watercolor. It showed the lake in early winter. Thin ice gathered along the shore, the west house roof barely visible through bare branches. "This should be in one of the houses," she said. "It was. Someone put it here. I didn't. Then it must have walked." Marissa lowered the painting. "Daniel thought you'd take it. Did he ask?" "No." That was the trouble with people who believed they knew what Margaret wanted. They could turn neglect into consideration without changing a single action. Marissa leaned the painting against the kitchen wall, face outward this time. "He's hurt. So am I." "I know." Margaret waited. Those two words were often followed by a request that the more competent person be understanding. Marissa pulled the scarf from her hair and retied it. "I pushed for the renovation." "I know. I hated feeling like a guest in that house. Everything had a story, and none of the stories included me, unless I was the one asking where to put the extra towels. You've been in the family 21 years. Exactly. That is a long time to ask where towels go. Margaret considered this. She had always thought Marissa's questions were criticism wrapped in politeness. Perhaps some had been. Perhaps others had been attempts to locate herself in a family, where Arthur answered every proposed change with, "That's how we've always done it." "You could have changed the cupboards without leaving them in the rain," Margaret said. "I know that too, and the path is mine. Daniel said it was shared. He says things become shared whenever he needs them." Marissa sighed. That also sounds accurate. They carried the watercolor to Margaret's bedroom and hung it above the narrow dresser. It did not match anything, which made it the first thing in the cottage that seemed deliberately placed. Before leaving, Marissa loaded both chairs, 4 boxes, and the fondue pot into her car. "Daniel is going to ask why I took that. Tell him appetite isn't ownership. He'll know you said it, then say it better." The first of Eric's adjusted reviews appeared online 2 days later. Diane Harris gave the house 4 stars. She praised the view, the clean kitchen, and Eric's mother, Margaret, who rescued us when our key was missing. She also wrote that the shore was not private as the original listing suggested, and that guests should expect to walk past a permanent residence to reach the water. Eric called before Margaret finished reading. "Did you ask her to write that?" "No. She used your exact language. I never called myself a permanent residence." "This isn't funny, neither was the missing key. The listing has been corrected. After they arrived, they loved the house. They gave it 4 stars. 4 stars is a punishment on these platforms." Margaret looked through the open window. Cal was measuring a board beneath the eaves, pencil behind his ear. "Then remember the right key. This affects both of us, you know. Lower bookings mean less money available for maintenance. Maintenance on your house, on the property. There is no longer one property, Eric. You were at the table." He went quiet. Margaret knew what he was doing. When he had been 20, silence meant she had disappointed him. At 30, it meant she had failed to understand pressure. At 50, it still made her want to fill the space with reassurance. She waited. Finally, he said, "I thought you wanted us to succeed." "I do. You have a strange way of showing it." The call ended. Cal came inside for coffee at 10:30. Margaret used a white mug that said, "World's okayest fisherman." Arthur's brown moose mug remained on the high shelf. "You glare at that phone any harder, it'll apologize," Cal said. "It doesn't have the range." He sat at the kitchen table, leaving sawdust on the chair. Margaret put a plate of shortbread between them. Eric got a 4-star review. "Sounds good. Apparently it's ruin. Then I've been ruined for years. Most people give me 3. You don't have reviews. My sister reviews me daily." Margaret smiled. "How is June?" "Mean as ever. Healthy enough to enjoy it." He ate 1 shortbread, then pushed the estimate across the table. 2 items were crossed out. The window trim had required less lumber than expected. "You reduced it," Margaret said. "I charge for what I did." Arthur would have kept the original total. Arthur would have lost the first estimate. They sat with the easy silence of people who did not require every quiet moment to prove affection. Cal glanced at the boxes. "They collecting things?" Marissa took a carload. "Good. She came without Daniel. Smarter." "Daniel is not stupid. Didn't say he was. Said she was smarter." Margaret gave him a look. "Different sentence," he said. Eric arrived Sunday for his first collection. He brought flattened boxes and parked at the West House, though nothing there required his attention. Margaret had arranged his belongings along one side of the sitting room. Fishing reels, framed photographs, the cocktail shaker, 2 wool blankets, Arthur's green tackle box, and a carton of papers labeled Eric, College, and After. On top sat the ceramic rooster. Eric picked it up by the unbroken wing. "What is this?" "You made it." "I did not." "Community pottery class. You wanted to build an ashtray, but they wouldn't let you." He turned the rooster over. His initials, EV, were carved into the base. "Oh my God, your father kept it." Eric smiled then, a real smile, surprised and younger. He used to tell people Daniel made the ugly stuff. Daniel's bowl survived. Of course it did. He always overbuilt. Eric set the rooster on the mantel, rather than in a box. For a while they packed without arguing. He wanted the tackle box, but not the reels. Margaret insisted they stay together. He took the wool blankets after she reminded him how cold the West House became in October. He declined the college papers unopened. "You gave those to us?" Margaret said. "I gave Dad some tax records. And 6 years of phone bills. Throw them away. You throw them away." He frowned. "Why does it matter who puts paper in the recycling?" "Because I have been the last person touching everything your family no longer wants. That's dramatic. It's cardboard." He picked up the carton. Near the bottom of his pile was Arthur's red plaid jacket. Eric unfolded it and held it against himself. The shoulders were too broad, the sleeves short. "You should keep that," Margaret said. "You sure?" "No. Take it anyway." He looked at her, but did not ask what she meant. He folded the jacket carefully. By the time his car was loaded, the cottage had gained an entire wall. Margaret could see the baseboard, scuffed and dusty, from the front window to the bedroom door. Eric stood on the path, with the rooster under one arm. "I have another group coming Friday," he said. 4 adults. They're celebrating an anniversary. Do they have the right key?" "Yes." "Do they know the path is shared? The listing says it. Do they know my cottage is not part of their rental?" He adjusted his hold on the rooster. "Your sign makes that clear." "Good." He looked toward the water. Dad wanted people to enjoy this place. Margaret almost answered sharply. Then she saw the plaid jacket folded on his back seat, its sleeve caught in the door. She opened the car, tucked it inside, and closed the door again. "Your father wanted people to enjoy him," she said. "The place was how he arranged it." Eric's mouth tightened. "You're angry at him now, too?" Grief isn't a loyalty oath. For once, he had no quick reply. After he left, Margaret moved the folding table outside and washed the newly visible baseboard. Lena arrived carrying a pot of tomato soup because, she said, Margaret's kitchen had been through enough. Cal stayed after finishing the vent. Marissa appeared with a blue pitcher, claiming it had ended up in her car by accident. Then she stayed because Lena handed her a bowl before she could escape. The 4 of them ate outside beneath the pines. There was no occasion. Cal complained that the soup needed pepper. Lena told him to develop character. Marissa laughed and wiped her bowl clean with bread. People passed on the public landing and called hello. Nobody asked Margaret to open a door, find a ledger, move a plumber, or explain the location of sheets. As dusk settled, the West House windows remained dark between the trees. Margaret looked through her own window at the cottage's cleared wall and the watercolor hanging straight above the dresser. The room was still crowded. It was still shabby. But, for the first time since Arthur died, something inside it had begun to look less like what the family had left behind, and more like what Margaret might choose to keep. Marissa carried the empty bowls inside and washed them without being asked. Lena dried. Cal remained at the table, pretending not to notice that everyone else was working until Margaret handed him the garbage bag. "You invited me for soup," he said. "I did not invite you to leave evidence." He took the bag. Marissa stood at the sink with her sleeves rolled above her elbows. "You should do this again. Make Cal take out garbage, feed people." "Your mother-in-law spent 38 years feeding people," Lena said. "We're trying to broaden her interests." "I like feeding people," Margaret said. Lena put a bowl in the cupboard. "You like people being fed. The labor is negotiable." The distinction stayed with Margaret after they left. On Friday morning, she made another pot of soup anyway. She told herself it was because Lena had returned the pot, and because the refrigerator held more celery than one woman could reasonably face alone. By noon, Cal knew. By 2, Sheila knew, though Margaret had not told Sheila anything. At 5:30, Lena appeared with cornbread, followed by Sheila with a jar of pickles and an explanation that she had been in the area despite living 40 minutes away. Eric's anniversary guests arrived while Margaret was setting bowls outside. They came in 2 vehicles and parked correctly at the West House. Margaret counted that as progress. The two couples were in their 40s and carried garment bags, coolers, grocery cartons, and a portable speaker large enough to address a parade. One woman waved from the fork. "Is the lake this way?" "It usually is," Lena called. Margaret gave her a look. "What?" "It hasn't moved." The guests introduced themselves as Tom and Gail Reardon and Bob and Sandra Wells. Gail explained that the Reardons were celebrating 20 years of marriage, then kissed Tom with the determined enthusiasm of someone who had announced an event and intended to deliver it. "We won't bother you," Sandra said. "We brought all our own food," Lena murmured. "A survival expedition." Margaret showed them the public landing and pointed out the shared path. They were pleasant. Tom admired the repaired marker. Bob asked whether Arthur's bench was original to the property, as if it might have been certified by a historical society. "My husband built it," Margaret said. "Craftsmanship," Bob said, tapping the arm. One of the legs was a replacement Cal had cut from dock lumber 3 years earlier, but Margaret accepted the compliment on Arthur's behalf. The guests carried their drinks to the water. Cal arrived with bread, saw them, and chose the chair facing away from the lake. "Friendly?" he asked. "So far. Night's young." The soup gathering remained small, but it no longer felt accidental. Sheila told a story about cleaning a rental where the guests had cooked lobsters in an electric kettle. Lena argued that anyone who could fit a lobster in a kettle deserved respect. Marissa came down late with a bowl of pasta salad and sat on the cottage step when the chairs filled. Daniel did not come. "He's pulling tile," Marissa said. "At this hour?" Margaret asked. "He says the bathroom will not defeat him. Tile doesn't know it's competing." At 8, music drifted from the West House. The volume was not unreasonable. At 9, it became reasonable only for people inside the West House. By 10, colored lights had appeared between the pines. Margaret walked up the path. Tom stood on a folding chair looping a wire around one of the trees. Gail directed him with a wine glass in her hand. "A little higher," she said. "Not on the trees," Margaret said. Tom nearly stepped off the chair sideways. Gail pressed a hand to her chest. "You scared me. I live here. We're just putting up lights. The cord crosses the path. We'll take them down tomorrow. Someone can trip tonight." Tom climbed down. "Eric said we could use the shore area. He didn't say you could attach things to my trees." Sandra emerged from the house holding the portable speaker. "We can move everything to the deck." Gail looked embarrassed. "We didn't mean any harm, I know." That was the problem. Harm arrived with very little intention. It came smiling, carrying its own food, certain somebody else had agreed. They moved the speaker uphill and removed the lowest strand of lights. The others remained on the branch nearest the West House, technically on Eric's side of the fork. Margaret returned to the cottage. At 12:40, breaking glass woke her. She sat up, disoriented, with one hand reaching toward the empty half of the bed. Laughter rose from the shore, followed by a loud whisper that traveled better than speech. Margaret put on her robe and boots. 3 of the guests stood near Arthur's bench. Tom had gone inside. Bob held a flashlight over the ground, while Sandra picked up pieces of a wine glass with a paper napkin. "I dropped it," Gail said. Her voice had lost its determination. "I'm so sorry. Don't use your hands. I'm not." "You are." Margaret brought a dustpan and work gloves from the cottage. The largest pieces came easily. Smaller shards had scattered into the gravel and needles, bright as ice beneath Bob's flashlight. "We'll get it in the morning," Sandra said. "People walk here in the morning." "So do we. You'll be wearing shoes." Nobody replied. They helped for 10 minutes. Bob found a broom at the West House. Gail apologized twice more and began crying after the second apology, though whether from drink, embarrassment, or 20 years of marriage, Margaret could not tell. By 1:15, the path looked clear. At 7 the next morning, Margaret found 3 more shards, a bottle cap, and a cigarette butt pressed into the soil beside the bench. She photographed them and sent the picture to Eric. He called while she was making coffee. "They cleaned up," he said. "They tried. I'll have Sheila check it. She cleans your house. I'm saying I'll handle it." "How?" "Do you want me to drive out and pick up a bottle cap? I want your guests to understand that the path is not an extension of your deck. They're adults, Mom. I can't supervise every glass they hold. You can supervise what you promise them." He made an impatient sound. "Send me a bill if there's damage." Margaret looked at the tiny cut on her finger. She had found the last shard while running her hand along the edge of the path. From now on, No rental guests on my section of the shore path after 10. You can't impose a curfew. I can decide when strangers walk past my bedroom. It's a vacation property. It's my home. Fine. I'll tell them to whisper. 10 o'clock, Eric. This is going to hurt bookings. Then advertise honestly. He ended the call without agreeing. At 9, Daniel came down carrying a shovel. Did you borrow that too? Margaret asked. It's mine. Then you've made progress. He did not smile. Can you look at something? The uphill drainage channel behind the east house was packed with broken tile, plaster dust, leaves, and 2 pieces of plastic sheeting. Water from the night's brief rain had pooled against the foundation. Margaret stood with her hands on her hips. That needs to be cleared, she said. I know that part. Then why am I here? I want to know where it drains. Toward the lower catch basin, then across the slope to the stone culvert. Where's the catch basin? Under your renovation trash. Daniel poked the shovel into the debris. It struck metal. Oh, yes. He pulled away wet leaves and uncovered the rusted grate. Dad never showed me this. Your father didn't clear it. Daniel leaned on the shovel. You did? Every spring and before heavy rain. How often does it back up? It doesn't, if you clear it. He glanced toward the exposed lower wall of the house. The contractor said he can put in a French drain. The one you have works. It's old. So is gravity. Marissa came outside carrying 2 mugs. She handed one to Daniel and offered the other to Margaret. Coffee truce, she said. Margaret took it. Daniel scraped debris from the grate. We'll clean it out. Not we, Marissa said. You're the one who told the tile guys to dump here. I said they could stage material out back. You also said the bathroom would take 4 days. It's taken 4 days. They're just not consecutive. Margaret hid a smile behind the mug. Daniel worked until the grate was visible, then stopped. I've got a call at 10, he said. You haven't cleared the channel, Margaret told him. I'll finish this afternoon. Rain was forecast for evening. Not much, but enough. You asked me to look, she said. I looked. He straightened. What does that mean? It means the next decision is yours. She carried Marissa's mug back down the path. Cal arrived Monday to replace the bathroom vent. He found Margaret standing on a chair, trying to reach the top shelf above the washing machine. Get down. I'm getting a towel. You're standing on a chair with curved legs. It was nearby. So is the floor. Margaret climbed down with dignity, which took longer than climbing up. Cal reached the towel without effort. I don't need you policing me, she said. I'm not. Police have pensions. He handed her the towel, then noticed the cut on her finger. What happened? Wine glass. You drinking now? Eric's guests. Cal looked toward the path. They cleaned most of it, Margaret said. Most glass is a poor amount. I set a 10 o'clock boundary. Good. He thinks it's a curfew. It is. I'm not running a summer camp. Then stop explaining it like one. Margaret frowned. What does that mean? It means you tell him when the path closes to rentals. You don't need him to agree that you're reasonable. He took his tools into the bathroom before she could answer. The rain came at 6, steady enough to blur the opposite shore. Margaret sat beneath her porch eave with Lena, finishing the last of the tomato soup. At 7:20, Daniel called. Do you still have the wet vacuum? Yes. Our lower floor is taking water. Did you clear the channel? A pause. I got called away. Margaret closed her eyes. It's not a flood, he said quickly. Just coming in along the wall. Where is your wet vacuum? Marissa got rid of it. I did not, Marissa called in the background. The contractor threw it out. You told him to clear the utility closet. It smelled like gasoline. It was a wet vac. Why did it smell like gasoline? Daniel returned to the phone. Can I borrow yours? Margaret looked through the rain. Water moved cleanly along her ditch, passing the cottage in a narrow brown stream. You can pick it up, she said, and tomorrow you clear the entire channel before you return it. He arrived in a raincoat and loafers. She gave him the vacuum, an extension cord, and the rubber boots Arthur had worn for 30 years. Daniel stared at them. These are Dad's. They're boots. Tonight they're yours. He pulled them on beneath the porch light. They were too large and cracked white around the ankles. Before he turned uphill, Margaret said, Daniel, he looked back. I will help you learn the house. I will not keep it for you. Rain ran from the hood of his coat. He nodded once. Then he carried the wet vacuum up the path, walking awkwardly in his father's boots, toward the work he had left for later. Daniel returned the wet vacuum at 8 the next morning. He had washed the canister, coiled the cord properly, and replaced the filter with a new one. Arthur's boots stood beside it, rinsed clean, but still wet inside. "The channel's clear," he said. "All of it, all the way to the culvert." Margaret looked at his hands. Dirt remained beneath his nails, and a blister had opened near his thumb. How long did it take? Longer than calling somebody would have. That's how you know it was maintenance. He leaned against the porch post. The wall dried out. "There's no real damage. This time, I know." She waited for him to ask whether she wanted coffee, then remembered he was at her house. "Do you want coffee?" she asked. "Please." He sat at the kitchen table while she poured. The cottage was still crowded, but the boxes had become orderly islands rather than a continent. Eric's college papers remained near the door. Daniel's final box sat beneath the window. He nodded toward Arthur's brown mug on the high shelf. "You don't use that?" "Not yet. Dad used it every morning." "I remember." Daniel rubbed his thumb over the new bandage Marissa had wrapped around his blister. "I should have listened about the drain." "Yes. I thought the contractor would handle it. You didn't hire him to think about rain. You hired him to make the bathroom look expensive." "It does look expensive." Then he succeeded. Daniel smiled into his coffee. "You could pretend not to enjoy this. I don't enjoy water in your house. You enjoy being right. I've had years of practice without recognition." He accepted that. Before leaving, he picked up the last box marked with his name. It contained old tax returns, a framed photograph of him and Arthur painting the east porch, 2 extension cords, and a wooden smoothing plane that had belonged to Arthur's father. Daniel held up the plane. "Can I keep this? It's in your box. I mean, do you want it?" Margaret did. Not because she had ever used it, but because Arthur had sharpened its blade every winter and tested it on scraps of pine until translucent curls covered his workbench. "What will you do with it?" she asked. "I don't know. Put it on a shelf, then no." His eyebrows rose. "If you learn to use it, you can have it. You're assigning homework for inheritance?" "I'm preventing a tool from becoming decor." Daniel turned the plane in his hands. "Cal could show me." "He could." "Would he?" "Ask him." Daniel set it back in the box, then removed it again. "I'll ask." The first of the month passed without Eric collecting his remaining carton. Margaret texted once. "Your deadline was yesterday." He answered, "Toss it." She carried the carton outside, opened it beside the recycling bin, and sorted every page. Phone bills went first. Old bank statements followed. She found a college newspaper with Eric's photograph on the business page, smiling beside a headline about student entrepreneurs. She kept that. She also kept 2 letters he had written during his first winter away, when he was lonely enough to admit it and young enough to believe his mother could fix distance by describing what the lake looked like. Everything else went into recycling. She did not tell him she had saved the letters. Keeping them was her choice, not a service. With the last boxes gone, Cal moved Arthur's desk beneath the front window. "Here?" he asked before setting it down. "A little left." He moved it. "No, back." He moved it back. "You're enjoying this," he said. "Immensely." Lena washed the walls with vinegar water. Marissa brought paint samples and, after Margaret rejected 6 shades of gray, with names such as Quiet Stone and Morning Fog, found a warm cream called Buttered Toast. "I object to the name," Margaret said. "You can call it beige. I object to beige. It'll look yellow in the afternoon. Then I'll call it yellow." They painted the sitting room over 2 evenings. Cal refused a brush, saying he had been hired for carpentry, then spent 40 minutes cutting in around the window because Lena deliberately did it badly. The cottage changed without becoming unrecognizable. Arthur's tool chest stayed beneath the side window. The watercolor remained above the dresser. The blue pitcher held branches from the maple near the fork. Margaret placed the old green bowls on open shelves Cal built from boards salvaged from the rotten step. On Friday, she made chicken stew. People began arriving before she put the bread out. Sheila brought a peach pie. Lena brought nothing and claimed seniority. Marissa came alone, carrying a folding chair. Cal's sister June appeared in a purple sweatshirt and immediately told him his beard made him look unemployed. "I am employed," he said. "By Margaret? For money." June looked at Margaret. "Good. Never barter with him. He overvalues himself." The table extended beneath the pines with 2 boards laid across sawhorses. There were no matching plates, and every chair had a different complaint. The gathering was not elegant enough to become an obligation. Margaret liked that. Daniel arrived after dark. He stood at the edge of the porch light until Marissa moved her chair to make room. He had the wooden plane under one arm. "Cal," he said, "you know how to use this?" Cal examined it. "Yes. Will you show me?" "For money." June pointed her fork at him. "See?" Daniel looked at Margaret. "Don't look at me," she said. "You're negotiating with a professional." Cal named a price low enough to be symbolic and high enough to matter. Daniel agreed. He sat beside Marissa, who bumped her shoulder against his. Nobody discussed the lake houses for almost half an hour. Then tires crunched near the county landing. A delivery truck stopped beside the fork, towing a rack of bright orange kayaks. The driver climbed out and read from a clipboard, "Vale Waters?" Margaret closed her eyes briefly. Eric's car appeared behind the truck. He got out wearing loafers without socks and waved the driver forward. "Bring them down by the shore," he called. The truck could not fit on the path, so the driver and his assistant unloaded 2 tandem kayaks and carried them downhill. Eric directed them toward the maple beside Arthur's bench. Margaret left the table. "Where are those going?" Eric barely glanced at her. "Just along the tree line." "No?" The driver stopped with one end of a kayak against his hip. Eric smiled for the audience. "We'll talk in a second." "We're talking now. They'll be chained to the maple." "Out of the way. That tree is on my parcel. It's temporary storage." "For how long?" "The season. That isn't temporary to a tree." The dinner behind them had gone quiet. Margaret could feel everyone trying not to watch while watching completely. Eric lowered his voice. "I advertise kayaks with the rental." "When?" "This week, before asking me where you could keep them. There's nowhere practical up at the house. You have a deck. Guests would have to carry them down." "Yes." "They're heavy." "Yes." His eyes narrowed. "You enjoy making this difficult." Margaret looked at the 2 men still holding the kayak. "Take them to the West House, please." The driver looked at Eric. Eric's jaw worked once. "Take them up." They carried both kayaks uphill, the orange plastic flashing between the trunks. Eric waited until the truck had gone. "You made me look ridiculous. You ordered boats without a place to put them. I had a place. You had my place." His gaze moved past her toward the table, where Lena was openly eating pie and staring back. "What is all this?" he asked. "Dinner? Every Friday?" "Twice does not make every. There are cars blocking the landing. 2 cars. Neither is blocking anything. You're turning the cottage into some kind of clubhouse while policing my 4 guests. My guests know where they are." Eric looked at Marissa and Daniel. "You're both okay with this?" Daniel set down his spoon. "It's Mom's house." That wasn't the question. It sounded like one. Margaret saw surprise cross Eric's face. Daniel saw it too, and looked away. Eric stepped closer to Margaret. "Those kayaks are part of the listing now. If people arrive and can't use them easily, I get another accuracy complaint. Then change the listing. I've got bookings through August. Then carry the kayaks." His laugh was short and empty. "Do you know what I've put into that house?" "Yes." "I kept the receipts for what came before it. This isn't about the past. It becomes about the past whenever you call something easy, because I used to do it." For a moment, Eric's anger looked like fear. It vanished quickly, but Margaret saw it. "I need the rental to work," he said. The admission was quiet enough that only she heard. She almost asked why. Instead, she said, "Then run it. Don't make me the missing employee." He left without eating. Daniel remained at the table, but said little afterward. Margaret could tell he wanted to explain his brother, to soften the edges for everyone. He did not. When he and Marissa left, he carried the wooden plane carefully beneath his jacket because rain had begun. The following Monday, 2 orange kayaks appeared on the West House deck. Eric had found a way to fit them after all. Guests carried them down the upper drive and launched from the public landing. It was awkward. Nobody died. Margaret's 10 o'clock rule lasted 9 days before being tested again. A couple staying at the West House came down at 10:30 with blankets and a bottle of wine. When she reminded them, they apologized and returned uphill. The next morning, Eric sent her a message. "Guests say you're confronting them at night. Please route issues through me." Margaret wrote, "I did. You argued." He did not answer. Cal began teaching Daniel to use the smoothing plane on Tuesday evenings. They worked outside the cottage because Arthur's tool chest was there, and because Cal said Daniel's renovated house contained too many surfaces that would become emotionally significant if scratched. Daniel was bad at first. He pressed too hard, tilted the blade, and produced rough chips instead of curls. "Let the tool work," Cal told him. "I am." "No, you're trying to win." Margaret listened from the porch. On the third evening, Daniel made one thin shaving that curled all the way to the ground. He held it up, pleased despite himself. Arthur would have praised him extravagantly, then taken the plane away and done it better. Cal only nodded. "That's one," he said. "Make 50. Daniel went back to work. At the end of the month, a woman Margaret did not know knocked on the cottage door. She wore a linen dress, carried a measuring wheel, and had a clipboard tucked beneath her arm. "Mrs. Vale," she said, "I'm Courtney Mills from North Shore Events." Margaret stepped outside. Courtney smiled toward the water. "Eric told me you could show me where vendors come through. I need to measure the path for the lakeside dinner." Margaret looked at the measuring wheel, then toward the West house. "What lakeside dinner?" she asked. Courtney's smile changed from welcoming to professional. "A private anniversary dinner," she said. 36 guests, seated. Mr. Vale said the west lawn overlooks the water. It does. He mentioned a level service path from the landing. He does not own that path. Courtney lowered the measuring wheel. "I understood the whole property belonged to the Vale family. It did. Now the west house belongs to my son. The east house belongs to my other son. And this cottage and the shore path belong to me." Oh, it was the same small sound Diane Harris had made. The sound of an outsider realizing she had stepped into a family sentence halfway through. Courtney glanced at her clipboard. The caterer needs a route for rolling carts. There are also 6 tables, 36 chairs, 2 beverage stations, lighting, and a portable sink. None of those are coming past my cottage. The dinner itself would be on Mr. Vale's lawn. Then he'll have to bring everything through his house or down his own steps. The steps are steep. Yes. Courtney pressed her lips together. "He said you had approved shore access." He did not ask. "I see." Margaret believed her. Courtney had the resigned expression of a woman who regularly discovered that the person signing an event contract did not control the weather, the neighbors, or the number of available electrical outlets. "I'm sorry he wasted your trip," Margaret said. Courtney pulled out her phone. "I think I should call him. Please do." She walked toward the landing for privacy. Margaret went inside, poured coffee, and stood at the window while Courtney paced beneath the maple. Her free hand made small chopping motions. At one point she looked directly at the cottage, then quickly away. Eric called Margaret before Courtney returned. "What did you say to her?" "The path isn't available for an event." "Why? You didn't ask." "I'm asking now?" "No." A beat passed. "You don't even know what it is." 36 people, 6 tables, 36 chairs, 2 drink stations, lights, catering carts, and a sink. It's one dinner. It's a restaurant being assembled beside my home. The dinner is on my lawn. The equipment crosses my land for an hour and leaves for another hour after 36 people have crossed in between. They won't be near your cottage. The path is 8 feet from my door. Eric exhaled slowly. "Put Courtney back on." "She's calling someone by the landing. Tell her to wait." Margaret looked through the window. Courtney was packing the measuring wheel into her car. She appears to have finished. Eric said something too quiet to understand, then ended the call. Courtney came to the porch before leaving. "I apologize for the confusion," she said. "It wasn't yours. We may be able to stage from the upper parking area. It will affect labor and setup time. That sounds like something Eric can decide." Courtney handed Margaret a business card. "If anyone arrives here with equipment, call me. I don't want my staff entering a property without permission." Margaret liked her immediately for using the correct word. Eric arrived 40 minutes later. He parked at the cottage instead of the West house, angled across the upper end of the path, as if his car itself had an argument. He came down without knocking. "You embarrassed me in front of a vendor." Courtney seemed difficult to embarrass. "I told her we had shore access." "You have walking access by permission. We've been over this. You keep hoping repetition will transfer ownership." Eric stood in the newly painted sitting room, noticing the cleared walls for the first time. His gaze moved over Arthur's desk, the green bowls, and the shelves made from the old step. "You've spent money on this." "Yes." "How much?" "Mine." "That's not what I asked. It's what I answered." He put both hands on his hips. "The dinner pays $6,000. Margaret blinked. For one night? Gross. There's cleaning, insurance, the planner, equipment, extra utilities. I'm not pocketing 6,000. You still signed before asking me? It didn't occur to me that you'd object to carts rolling down a path. Nothing occurs to you until someone else makes it inconvenient. I've already taken the deposit. Return it. It's non-refundable. Then you can afford the extra labor from your parking area. The event company says that route adds 2,000. Then the dinner still pays 4. You don't know how any of this works. I ran those houses before rental software had color photographs. You answered the phone and washed sheets. This is different. The words hung between them. Margaret felt no dramatic break inside herself. Only a stillness, familiar from the years when Arthur spoke carelessly and expected the meal to continue. I answered the phone, she said. I washed sheets. I repaired screens, scheduled cleaners, cleared drains, replaced propane, balanced records, soothed guests, and kept your father from promising the same week to 2 families. It looked simple because I was good at it. Eric looked away first. I didn't mean that was all you did. You meant it was all the part worth naming. He walked to the window. Outside, Cal's green truck came around the bend and continued toward the public landing. Cal saw Eric's car and did not stop. This rental has to produce, Eric said. Margaret heard the strain beneath the flatness. Why? Because I'm not treating it like a hobby. That isn't an answer. I've put money into furnishings, photography, booking fees, repairs, taxes. I have obligations. What obligations? Mine. He used the word back at her, but it did not fit him as comfortably. Margaret waited. Eric had always explained success in detail and trouble in categories. If you need help, she said, say what the trouble is. I'm not asking for help. I'm asking to use the path for one evening. Those are the same requests if you have already spent the money. His jaw tightened. What if I pay you? He said. $500? No. 1,000. The path isn't for sale by the evening. That's sentimental nonsense. It is where I live. You host 10 people under the trees every Friday. They come because I invite them. So, this is about control. Yes. He seemed surprised. Margaret folded her arms. Control over who comes past my windows, what is tied to my trees, and whether a truckload of strangers turns my home into a service entrance. That kind of control is called living somewhere. Eric laughed once without humor. Dad would hate this. Your father hated any boundary he didn't draw himself. He'd hate what you're doing to the family. What am I doing? Keeping score, making everyone ask permission for things we've done our whole lives. Your whole life, Eric, not mine. His face hardened. Fine, I'll solve it. He left without looking at the cottage again. That evening, Daniel called. Eric says you blocked his event. I blocked his carts. He says it's the same thing. It's only the same because he sold my path as part of the package. Daniel was quiet. In the background, Margaret heard the scrape of the smoothing plane. He had been practicing. Could he use our side? He asked. The east drive reaches your lawn. Marissa doesn't want 36 people crossing the new floors. Margaret nearly laughed. Then she understands. He's in a bad place. What place? He borrowed against his consulting business when things slowed down. The lake house was supposed to cover the payments. There it was. Not a catastrophe, not yet. But the first plain edge of Eric's fear. Did he tell you that? Margaret asked. Not directly. Then how do you know? He asked if I could float him until September. Can you? No. The answer came quickly enough to contain its own trouble. Margaret sat at Arthur's desk. What's happening with you? Nothing? Renovation costs ran over? How far? We can manage? Daniel, we can manage if we stop finding galvanized pipe. She closed her eyes. Both sons had taken valuable houses and immediately begun spending against versions of the future that required nothing to go wrong. Then stop renovating, she said. You sound like Marissa. Marissa sounds intelligent. She'll be thrilled. Daniel lowered his voice. Could you let Eric have one night? I know he handled it badly. He always handles the asking part badly. Because he asks after the answer no longer matters to him. I'm not saying he's right. You're asking me to give him what he wants so he won't have to be wrong. No. I'm asking whether this particular fight is worth it. Margaret looked out at the shore path, pale in the dusk. 2 neighbors walked past and raised their hands in greeting. It is worth deciding what my home is, she said. Daniel sighed. Okay. The word was not agreement. It was retreat. 2 days later, Courtney called. "We can stage from the upper lot," she said, "but Mr. Vale wants a full rain backup inside the house. The main room won't seat 36. It never has. He's considering reducing the guest count. That sounds sensible." Courtney hesitated. "He also asked whether we could treat your path as an emergency exit." "No, I told him I would need your written permission." "You won't get it." "Understood." Margaret appreciated how easily Courtney accepted a complete sentence. The anniversary dinner remained on Eric's calendar for another week. Margaret knew because the event company's van came twice to inspect the upper route, and because Eric began moving furniture into the West House garage. He did not speak to her. When their paths crossed, he nodded with brittle politeness. Friday dinner grew to 12 people. Margaret made vegetable soup in the largest pot she owned. Lena brought biscuits. Sheila brought nothing and claimed she was following Lena's example. Daniel and Marissa arrived together. Cal came late, washed his hands at the outdoor tap, and sat beside Margaret without asking anyone to move. The path held conversation instead of equipment. June argued with Sheila about the correct way to freeze peaches. Daniel showed Cal a pine board he had planned nearly smooth. Marissa used the blue pitcher for wildflowers and put it back on Margaret's shelf before leaving. At 9:50, Eric's renters passed on their way uphill. They waved. Margaret waved back. At 10, the shore belonged to darkness, water, and the people she had invited to remain. Courtney called the following morning. "The clients chose the Lakeside Inn," she said. "They needed a guaranteed indoor option." Margaret sat on the repaired step. "I'm sorry you lost the work. We're still planning it, just elsewhere. And Eric, he'll receive the house cancellation fee under his contract. I shouldn't say more than that. You haven't." After they hung up, Margaret waited. Eric's message arrived at noon. "Happy now?" She read it twice. Then she placed the phone face down on Arthur's desk and walked outside, where Cal was resetting a loose stone on the path. "No," she said, though Eric was not there to hear it. That wasn't the point. Cal looked up from the loose stone. What wasn't the point? Margaret showed him Eric's message. He read it, handed back the phone, and pressed the stone into its bed of sand. "You happy?" "No." "Then don't answer a stupid question." "He lost money." "He lost money he hadn't earned yet. He took a deposit. Did he return it?" Courtney said he gets a cancellation fee. Cal tamped the sand with the heel of his glove. Then he lost the bigger amount he expected. That still feels like loss. So does paying taxes. Doesn't make the county your mother. Margaret sat on Arthur's bench. "You have a gift for comfort. I left it in my other truck." She did not reply to Eric. The silence between them lasted through the first yellow leaves. He kept renting the West House, but the gaps between bookings widened after Labor Day. His rates dropped. The welcome binder disappeared after a guest spilled coffee across the restaurant pages, and the plastic apples migrated from the dining table to a kitchen cabinet, where Margaret discovered them while showing Sheila the location of a circuit breaker. Sheila had finally negotiated a rate that included laundry. Eric complained about it once, and then stopped calling Margaret to translate. Daniel's renovation slowed for a different reason. The shower worked, the pipes did not leak, and half the expensive fixtures Marissa had ordered remained boxed in the dining room. She began returning what she could. "Apparently we don't need a heated towel bar," she told Margaret one Friday. "Nobody needs a heated towel. People in Norway might. They have radiators." Marissa placed a pan of baked macaroni on the outdoor table. The evening had turned cool enough for sweaters. Maple leaves skated along the path whenever the wind came off the lake. Daniel arrived carrying the wooden smoothing plane and a piece of pine. He set the board in front of Margaret. The surface was not perfect. One end bore 2 shallow gouges, and a narrow strip along the edge had been missed. But the center was smooth enough to catch the glow from the porch light. "I made 50 curls," he said. 47, Cal said from behind him. "Some broke. Curls break. Counts don't change." Margaret ran her palm over the wood. "You can keep the plane," she said. Daniel smiled. "You sure?" "No." "Take it anyway." He understood the echo. His smile faded but did not disappear. "I'll use it," he said. "That's why you can have it." He wrapped the plane in an old dish towel before carrying it uphill. Arthur would have used a shop rag. The difference felt promising. Friday dinners moved inside as the nights cooled. The cottage could not hold 12 comfortably, which meant people became comfortable without room. Lena ate on the desk chair. June claimed the repaired step and wore 2 coats. Cal brought a folding table that slanted toward the stove. Margaret stopped worrying about matching bowls after Sheila drank stew from a mug because she had arrived late. The gatherings cost Margaret money. Not much, but enough for her to notice at the grocery store. Lena began leaving cash beneath the breadboard until Margaret threatened to hide it in her shoes. After that, everyone brought something. The food improved and became less predictable. Eric never came. He drove out on weekends when the house was empty, usually after dark. Margaret saw lamps move behind the windows as he checked thermostats and stripped beds. Once, she watched him carry both kayaks into the garage alone. One slipped and struck his shin. He stood in the driveway with his head bowed over the orange plastic. She nearly went up. Then he lifted the kayak and continued. A week later, he called about the well pump. "It's cycling every few minutes," he said. "Have you checked for a running toilet?" "Yes, all 4. I know how toilets work. That wasn't my question." A pause. 3. The upstairs hall toilet sticks. I'll check it. If it isn't that, call Bennett Pump before the ground freezes. They charge just to come out. Yes. Could be the pressure switch. Could be. Cal no pumps? Call Cal and ask. You're sitting beside him every Friday. That has not made me his dispatcher. Eric muttered something and ended the call. Margaret did not know whether he called Bennett or Cal. The pump continued to cycle whenever she passed the West house, a faint mechanical thump beneath the porch. Daniel came down alone on a Sunday afternoon. He wore a wool coat over a sweatshirt and carried no tool, box, or wet vacuum. Margaret was raking needles from the drainage channel. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We are. Inside?" That made her set down the rake. He sat at the kitchen table while Margaret remained standing. "There's an offer," he said. "For what?" "The properties." "Which properties?" Daniel looked toward the window. "All of them." Margaret pulled out the opposite chair and sat carefully. "Mine is not for sale. I know. Nobody's saying it is. An offer requires something to be offered. It's preliminary. Eric talked to a developer who's been buying shoreline north of the landing. Eric talked to him about your house, and his, and mine. He described the parcels, without asking me." Daniel rubbed his wedding ring. "The developer is only interested if the shoreline stays together. There is your problem. Mom, the number is significant. So is no. You haven't heard it. I don't need to know how much money I don't want." He leaned forward. "Please don't turn this into another boundary test. Your brother discussed selling my home to a stranger. What kind of test should I call it? He didn't list it. He asked what the combined land might be worth, and discovered my path makes his answer larger." Daniel's face tightened. "It makes all our answers larger." There it was, carrying her consent before she had given it. "How badly do you need this?" she asked. He looked down. "The renovation went over," he said. "Not just the plumbing. The loan rate adjusted. We can make the payments, but it's tight. And Eric, he hasn't said. He never says. He doesn't have to. The rental income isn't covering what he projected. His consulting work is still slow." Margaret looked at the watercolor above the dresser. Winter ice gathered along its painted shore, beautiful because it could not soak through a foundation or crack a pipe. "What does the developer want to build?" she asked. 4 homes. Maybe 5. There would be a private drive along the upper boundary. And the cottage, it would come down. Daniel said it softly, as if the cottage might be sleeping. "What about the path?" "They'd widen part of it for lake access." "And the pines?" "I don't know. You know, some would have to come out." Margaret looked around the room. Buttered toast walls. Arthur's desk beneath the window. Green bowls on shelves made from the rotten step. The repaired back door. Cal's pencil mark still visible above the frame where he had measured twice and complained once. "How long has Eric been discussing this?" 2 weeks, and you? Since Tuesday. This is Sunday. I wanted to understand it before bringing it to you. No, you wanted to decide whether you liked it before telling me I was part of it. Daniel's chair scraped backward. "I knew you'd hear it that way. Because it is accurate, because everything has become evidence against us." He stood and went to the window. Margaret watched his reflection. He looked tired, older than he had in Arthur's boots, and more like his father than either of them would have welcomed. "What would happen to me?" she asked. He turned. "You'd have choices." The same word Eric had used over the salmon dinner. What choices? You could buy something in town, a condo maybe, no steps, no exterior maintenance. Or you could stay with us while you decide. Where? We'd keep the downstairs room. Most of the time, his face changed. Margaret rose. You thought I would end up there anyway. That isn't what I said. You and Marissa made the room flexible because you expected me to become flexible. We expected you might not want to live alone forever. You planned my future around me becoming weaker. We worried about you. You worried efficiently. You divided the houses, put me in the cottage, and assumed time would finish the transfer. Daniel stared at her. Nobody put you here. You chose it. I chose ownership over being a guest in a room you might need on weekends. We offered you a home. You offered me access. The words silenced both of them. Outside, a rake fell where Margaret had left it balanced against the porch. The wooden handle struck the step, then rolled into the needles. Daniel sat again. I'm not trying to take your home. Then stop helping your brother price it. He pressed both palms against the table. I'm trying to save ours. Margaret felt the sentence like cold water. I took less cash so neither of you would have to sell, she said. We didn't ask you to do that. You were relieved when I did. That doesn't mean we knew what it would cost you. You didn't ask. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. Margaret picked up her rake from outside. When she returned, he was still seated. Tell Eric the answer is no, she said. He wants us all to meet. The answer will be no with more chairs. He thinks you'll listen if you see the numbers. I have listened to numbers my whole life. Grocery totals, tax bills, rental weeks, medication costs, loan payments, every dollar your father promised before he checked whether we had it. I am not confused by money. I didn't say you were. You came to explain significance. Daniel stood. I came because I thought it should be me. The honesty of that stopped her. Why? Because Eric would make it a fight. And you? I thought I could make it reasonable. Margaret looked at him with more sadness than anger. That is how you make your fights, Daniel. He left without taking the pine board from the table. Marissa came down after dark. She did not knock. She stepped inside, shut the door, and said, I didn't know. Margaret was washing the single bowl she had used for supper. About the offer? About what Daniel thought. The downstairs room? Marissa nodded. I wanted a guest room. An actual guest room. Not a place where you waited to need us. Margaret set the bowl in the rack. He may not have understood the difference, Marissa said. He understands now. Good. It was a hard word, not a pleased one. Marissa took off her coat but did not sit. Eric is coming tomorrow. He asked us to meet at the East House. Will there be salmon? I doubt it. We returned the good roasting pan. Margaret almost smiled. He has numbers, Marissa continued, and drawings. Then he can admire them. Daniel will go. I know. He may agree with Eric. I know that too. Marissa looked toward the path outside. What will you do? Keep my house. The next evening, both lake houses were lit when Margaret climbed the hill. Eric's car stood beside Daniel's, and a black folder waited on the East House dining table. Eric rose when she entered. Thank you for coming, he said, formal as a salesman. Margaret removed her coat and placed it over the chair beside her. I came to make sure Daniel didn't have to soften my answer for you. Eric opened the folder. On top was a glossy drawing of 4 new roofs where the 2 lake houses and Caretaker's cottage now stood. A broad, pale walkway ran along the shore. Arthur's bench, the maple, and the pines were gone. Eric tapped the proposed path with one finger. This only works if we act together, he said. Margaret looked at her sons on opposite sides of the table. No, she said. It only works if I disappear. Eric's finger remained on the drawing. That's not what this is, he said. It shows my home removed. It shows a development concept. Conceptually removed, then? Daniel stared at the glossy page. Marissa stood near the counter with her arms folded, not sitting close enough to suggest she had agreed to anything. Eric turned the drawing around so Margaret could see the figures beneath it. The combined offer is almost 40% above individual market value, for 3 parcels the buyer cannot otherwise assemble. Exactly. That's the opportunity. For him, for all of us. Margaret looked at Daniel. Is that your word or his? Daniel rubbed his forehead. It is a lot of money. You have already told me. No, I told you it was significant. I didn't know the final number. Marissa stepped closer to the table. What's the offer for only the 2 houses? Eric did not answer. There is one, isn't there? She asked. It's lower, How much lower? Enough that it doesn't solve the problem. Whose problem? Margaret asked. Eric closed the folder halfway. You want everything phrased so somebody looks selfish. I want nouns. My debt. Daniel's renovation loan. The taxes that will rise again next year. The fact that both houses need more work than either of us knew. You did know, Margaret said. You didn't want to count it. Eric's face flushed. I am trying to turn an inherited liability into something useful. Daniel looked up sharply. Don't call them liabilities. They are if they drain cash. Dad built those houses. Dad postponed half the work they needed. Margaret almost defended Arthur. The reflex rose before thought, an old shield lifted for a man who had often left her standing behind it alone. She let it fall. He did, she said. Both sons looked at her. Eric pushed the folder toward her. Your share would buy you any place you wanted. I am in the place I want. A 600-square-foot cottage with steps and a failing roof. The roof isn't failing, not yet. Neither am I. I didn't say you were. You keep describing a future in which I should become easier to store. Marissa closed her eyes. Eric stood. This is impossible. No. This is no. The buyer won't wait forever. Then he should continue without me. He won't. Then the conversation is finished. Daniel reached for the folder. Eric, what happens if we don't sell? Nothing good. Be specific. Eric gave him a hard look. The consulting line comes due in December. If bookings stay where they are, I have to refinance or sell the West House by itself. And if you sell by itself, Marissa asked, I cover the line and lose most of what I put into the renovation. You keep saying, put in, Margaret said. You mean spent. That's rich from someone painting a cottage that should be torn down. The room went still. Daniel rose so quickly his chair tipped backward. Enough. Eric looked at him. Don't perform for her. You want the sale too? I wanted to consider it. You wanted the money. So do you. At least I admit it. You admitted it after telling Mom the path was an opportunity. Eric's laugh was sharp. There he is. St. Daniel, arriving after everyone else took the risk. Margaret picked up her coat. Marissa moved toward her. You don't have to leave. Yes, I do. Eric's anger turned toward Margaret again. You took the smallest piece and now you get to control what happens to everything around it. I control what happens to mine. You built yourself a perfect position. I chose the part neither of you wanted. We thought you were being sentimental. You thought I was being harmless. She put on her coat and walked out. Daniel followed her to the porch. Mom? She turned. He stood beneath the new light Marissa had chosen, his face pale against the black windows. I'm sorry, he said. For which part? His mouth opened. That is not cruelty, Margaret said. You need to know. He looked back through the glass at Eric and the folder. I wanted a way out, he said. Then stop digging before you ask someone else for ground. She descended the steps alone. Voices rose inside the house before she reached the fork. Eric's carried first, then Daniel's. Marissa said something, neither man answered. Margaret continued downhill without slowing. The weather report the next morning showed a wide band of autumn rain moving east across the state. 3 to 5 inches, possibly more along the lake, high winds after midnight. Margaret brought the porch chairs inside, cleared leaves from the drainage channel, and checked the batteries and 2 flashlights. She moved Arthur's bench 6 feet uphill with Cal's help. You planning to sit in the storm? He asked. I'm planning not to watch the bench float away. It weighs 80 pounds. So did Arthur's confidence. Cal secured the bench legs to 2 buried anchors they had used during winter. Then he inspected the cottage window trim and the repaired vent. Should hold, he said. That sounds almost encouraging. Don't spread it around. Lena arrived in the red raincoat with bread, canned soup, and enough batteries to power a small airport. You know I have food, Margaret said. You have ingredients. Storms require food that opens with a tab. They stacked supplies on the kitchen counter. Margaret sent one message to both sons. Heavy rain tonight. Clear drains and secure anything outside. Daniel answered, already on it. Eric answered 20 minutes later. Handled. Margaret walked to the West House anyway, not to inspect, she told herself. But because Sheila had left a bag of clean towels at the cottage by mistake, 2 couples were checking in. One man rolled a suitcase across the porch while the others unloaded groceries. Eric stood inside beside the welcome binder, explaining the fireplace. He saw Margaret and frowned. What? Sheila left these. She set the towel bag down. I told you the storm was handled, he said quietly. I brought towels. The well pump thumped beneath the floor. Margaret heard it cycle again before she reached the door. Did you call Bennett? It's the hall toilet. Did you fix it? I adjusted the float. The pump thumped a third time. One of the guests looked toward the kitchen. What's that noise? Water system, Eric said. Old houses have personality. Margaret met his eyes. He walked her onto the porch. Bennett can't come until next week. When did you call? This morning. You knew a month ago. It stopped cycling. It's cycling now? I know. Rain began in scattered drops, darkening the deck boards. Shut it off when the guests leave, Margaret said. If it overheats, I know how a pump works. No, you know what you want it to do. He held the porch door open for her. The gesture looked polite from inside. Margaret went home. At the east house, Daniel and Marissa cleared the upper grate together. Margaret could see them from the fork, both wearing raincoats and working without speaking. A pile of trimmed branches and construction debris sat well away from the channel. Daniel looked up. We got it, he called. Margaret nodded and continued. The rain thickened before dusk. Water drummed on the cottage roof, ran through the clean gutters, and flowed along the channel in a fast brown stream. The lights flickered twice but remained on. Cal called at 7. Dry? So far. Call if that changes. What will you do from 20 miles away? Say I told you to call somebody closer. Lena called next. Sheila sent a picture of her basement floor with the message, still drier than my first marriage. At 8:30, the West House guests came down the path, carrying umbrellas and overnight bags. Margaret opened the door before they knocked. We have no water, a woman said. She was perhaps 50, with soaked hair plastered to her cheeks. Eric told us you could reset something, did he? He said you know the system. Behind her, lightning flashed over the lake. The other guests stood beneath the pines with luggage gathering rain. Margaret took her coat from the hook. At the West House, the faucets produced one cough of brown water, and then air. The pump housing smelled hot. Margaret switched off the breaker. Can you fix it? One man asked. No. Eric said there was a reset. There is. Resetting a burned pump does not unburn it. The woman held out her phone. Eric was on speaker. Mom, Bennett has an emergency number, he said. Then call it. They won't come until the wind drops. Then your guests need somewhere else to stay. Every hotel around the lake is full because of the outage north of town. That is not something I can repair. Another gust struck the house. Rain blew beneath the porch roof. Eric lowered his voice. Can they use the cottage? Margaret looked at the 4 wet adults. Her cottage held 1 bedroom, a narrow sofa, and 12 people's worth of folding chairs, but nowhere for 4 strangers to sleep. They can wait there while you arrange transportation, she said. They cannot stay the night. I'm 2 hours away, then begin driving. The guests heard. Their discomfort turned toward anger, but not at Margaret. You told us there was an on-site property manager, the woman said into the phone. Margaret went still. Eric answered too quickly. I said there was someone on site familiar with the property. You said manager. The guest ended the call. Margaret led them downhill using the shore path because the upper drive was already washing out along one edge. At the cottage, she gave them towels, hot soup, and dry places to sit. One couple found a motel 45 minutes south and called a car service willing to attempt the road. The other arranged to stay with friends in the city. Margaret did not accept their offers to pay for the soup. At 10:15, Eric arrived, drenched and furious with the storm, the pump, the road, and anything else that could not be persuaded by tone. His guests had just left. You called me the property manager? Margaret asked. I said you were nearby. That is not what they heard. They misunderstood. Did you put it in writing? He looked away. The cottage lights went out. For a moment, the only sound was rain hammering the roof. Then Margaret found a flashlight and switched it on. Its beam caught Eric's face, stripped of all the polish he usually carried. From uphill came a shout. Daniel appeared at the fork with a flashlight swinging in one hand. He ran down the path through water that reached his ankles. Mom, he called. Margaret stepped outside. Daniel stopped beneath the porch light that no longer worked. His raincoat hung open and his shirt was soaked to the chest. The east basement's flooding, he said. Not seeping, flooding. Behind him, water poured off the slope in a new silver stream, cutting across the path toward the house. Margaret lifted the flashlight. Where's Marissa? Moving things upstairs. Did the channel overflow? No. Daniel struggled for breath. The new downspout trench collapsed. It's sending everything against the lower wall. Eric stood in the cottage doorway. For 1 second, both sons looked at Margaret exactly as they had at the kitchen table after Arthur died, waiting for her to make the next part easy. She handed Daniel the flashlight. "Get shovels," she said. "This time, you're both coming." Eric found 2 shovels in the cottage shed. Daniel took the wider one. "The trench starts above the east wall," Margaret said. "Cut across the slope until you meet the old channel." "In this rain," Eric shouted. "That is when the water is here." Daniel was already climbing. Eric followed with his loafers slipping in the mud. Margaret pulled on Arthur's rubber boots and went after them. The rain struck her face hard enough to blur the path. Water ran over the stones in shallow sheets, carrying pine needles, bark, and pale scraps of insulation from somewhere uphill. At the east house, Marissa had moved lamps, boxes, and 2 dining chairs onto the stairs. Water spread across the lower room in a dark, shining layer. The new flooring had lifted along one seam. "The breaker's off down here," she said. "I checked." "Good. What can I do?" "Roll towels against the door to the finished room. Then call Lena and ask whether Martin still has his transfer pump." Marissa stared at her. "Lena's neighbor, Martin?" "Yes." "At this hour?" "He is retired. Every hour is suspicious to him." Outside, Daniel drove his shovel into the slope where the new downspout trench had collapsed. The soil was saturated and heavy. Eric tried to clear it from below until Margaret told him he was standing where the diverted water needed to go. Then, "Where do you want me?" "Beside your brother." The 2 men dug shoulder to shoulder. They were not good at it together. Eric worked fast, throwing mud into Daniel's section. Daniel tried to correct the angle each time, which made Eric work faster. Within minutes, they were arguing over a ditch neither had known existed an hour before. "Stop making it pretty," Eric said. "I'm making it drain. It's an emergency, not one of your woodworking lessons. It would go faster if you stopped filling it back in." Margaret planted Arthur's shovel in the mud between them. "Water does not care which one of you wins," she said. "Cut downhill." They did. Marissa came outside carrying Margaret's phone. "Lena's calling Martin. Cal is on his way. I told him not to drive in this. He said you don't supervise his truck." That sounded like Cal. The temporary channel began to take water, slowly at first, then in a brown rush that collapsed one side. Daniel jumped back. Eric lost a shoe. For one absurd second, both men stared at the black loafer sinking heel first in the mud. "Leave it," Margaret said. "That's a $300 shoe. Then it should know how to swim." Daniel laughed. It came out wild and exhausted. Even Eric smiled, though he was still wearing one shoe. They widened the trench. Martin arrived from the public landing 20 minutes later with a transfer pump, 2 hoses, and language that grew more inventive each time the wind moved his hood. He lived up the road, but a fallen branch blocked the upper drive. He had brought the equipment downhill through the public landing and along Margaret's shore path in a garden cart. Lena came behind him, carrying a thermos and 4 flashlights. "I told him you needed a pump," she said. Martin looked at the east basement. "You need a canoe." "Can you help?" Margaret asked. "I can criticize first. Cal's coming. He has that department." Martin set the pump near the lower door. Eric and Daniel carried the intake hose through the water, while Marissa held lights. The pump coughed twice, then began sending a thick stream downhill toward the old drainage channel. More help arrived without Margaret asking. June brought dry gloves. Sheila appeared in a plastic poncho with a stack of old towels from her cleaning supplies. A neighbor named Walt cleared branches from the lower path with a bow saw. Nobody came because Eric owned a rental or Daniel owned a renovated house. They came because Lena called, because Margaret had fed them, because Arthur's bench had held their conversations, and because people who used a path tended to notice when trouble traveled along it. Cal arrived last, wet to the skin and furious at everyone. "The county road is half a lake," he said. "I told you not to come," Margaret replied. "No, Marissa told me. You told her to tell me. That counts." "It doesn't." He examined the temporary trench, adjusted the pump hose, and then pointed at Eric. "Carry those sandbags." Eric did not ask who had put Cal in charge. He carried them. By midnight, the water inside the east house had stopped rising. The finished lower room still held 2 inches, but the flow against the wall had weakened. Daniel and Eric stacked sandbags along the collapsed trench. Marissa and Sheila pushed water toward the pump intake with wide garage brooms. Margaret's back ached from standing on the slope. Her hands had gone cold inside wet gloves. When she bent to lift another bag, Cal took it. "I can carry sand," she said. "You're shaking. I'm cold. Go be cold indoors." She would have argued, but the ground shifted slightly beneath her boot. Cal caught her elbow. "You know where the water should go," he said. "They need you upright more than they need one bag." It was not kindness dressed as praise. It was practical, which allowed her to obey. At the cottage, Lena had heated canned soup on the gas stove and lined mugs across the counter. People came down in turns, leaving mud at the door and wet coats over every chair. Eric stood near the stove in borrowed socks and drank soup from the world's okayest fisherman mug. Margaret looked at it in his hands. "What?" he asked. "Nothing." He followed her gaze and turned the mug around. "Was this Dad's?" "One of many." "I remember it. He hated fishing by the end. He loved fishing. He loved telling people he fished. Mosquitoes made him furious." Eric gave a tired laugh. "That's true." For a few minutes, they stood without a quarrel between them. The power remained out. The cottage glowed with battery lanterns, its new walls warm and close around people who had nowhere else to sit. Then Eric looked through the window toward the dark west house. "The pump's gone," he said. "Yes, I'll have to refund the weekend." "Yes, probably the next booking, too." Margaret said nothing. He put down the mug. "You warned me." It was not an apology, but it had no defense attached. That made it new. At 2 in the morning, the wind eased. The rain continued, softer now, and the transfer pump caught up with the water inside Daniel's lower room. By dawn, everyone was exhausted enough to stop pretending otherwise. The East House had lost part of its flooring, the baseboards, and several boxes of fixtures stored against the wall. The new bathroom upstairs was untouched. The structure remained sound, though Cal would not say more until everything dried. The cottage had stayed dry. Water had filled Margaret's drainage channel almost to the top, but never crossed it. The repaired gutters held. The back step was slick with mud and crowded with boots, yet solid beneath every person who used it. Daniel stood beside the channel as gray light spread over the lake. "You did all this every year?" he asked. "Not the storm, the clearing, the drains, the pumps, getting people here. Most years I got less wet." He looked uphill at his house. "I thought maintenance meant paying somebody when something broke. Sometimes? What's the rest? Noticing before it breaks." Daniel nodded. His face had gone slack with fatigue. "I'm sorry," he said. Margaret did not ask which part this time. "I know," she answered. It was not forgiveness. It was enough to let him stand beside her without defending himself. Eric slept for an hour on Margaret's sofa, then left to meet the pump company. He thanked no one individually. Before going, he placed Arthur's fishing mug in the sink and washed it. The work continued after the storm passed. Wet flooring came out of the East House in warped strips. Daniel did not hire anyone to remove it. He and Marissa carried it to a rented disposal trailer while Cal opened the lower walls to dry. Marissa returned the heated towel bar, 2 unopened light fixtures, and a box of imported tile. The refunds did not cover the damage, but they softened it. Daniel stopped talking about the developer. Eric did not. 3 days after the storm, he came to the cottage with the black folder under his arm. He had shaved, changed clothes, and recovered the smoothness in his voice, but mud remained beneath the edge of one thumbnail. "The offer expires Friday," he said. Margaret continued wiping dirt from the green bowls. "Then it expires." "You saw what these houses require." "Yes, you saw how vulnerable they are." "I saw what happened after warnings were postponed." His mouth tightened. "The point is, this is only going to get harder. For whom? For everybody. You think because the cottage stayed dry, you won something? No. You had 10 people running around here because one drain failed. They came. They won't always. Neither will I. That doesn't mean I sell today." Eric set the folder on Arthur's desk. "Daniel's backing out. He was never in. He wanted the sale until you made him ashamed of it." "Did he say that?" "He said he's fixing the East House." "That sounds like Daniel. He can't afford to fix it properly. Then he'll learn what he can afford." Eric paced to the window. "I cannot carry the West House through winter." Margaret dried her hands. "Then sell it." He turned. "By itself? It is yours by itself. I'll lose money." "You may. You say that like it has nothing to do with you. It has something to do with me. It does not belong to me. He stared at her for a long moment. If I list it, I need permanent shore access. No buyer pays full value for a lake house that has to ask your permission to reach the lake. The house reaches the public landing from the upper drive. That is not waterfront access. It never owned waterfront. We treated it as if it did for decades. We allowed guests to cross, then put that in writing. Margaret looked at him. Personal access for the owner, Eric said. Guests, renters, whatever makes it marketable. Not whatever. Here we go. No events, no equipment storage, no vendors. Quiet after 10. Access can continue for people staying at the house, by the footpath, as long as the cottage remains a private residence. Eric's face shifted as he calculated. And if you sell the cottage, the arrangement can be discussed with the new owner. That uncertainty lowers the price. So does a burned pump. He looked toward Arthur's bench. You could help me once, he said. Margaret felt the old pull in the sentence. It's practiced unfairness. Once meant now. Help meant absorb. History meant nothing that could be counted against him. I have helped you many times, she said. I will agree to fair access. I will not erase myself to improve your listing. He picked up the folder. Dad never made everything this hard. No. He left the hard parts to me. Eric walked out. The developer's offer expired on Friday. On Monday, a real estate sign appeared beside the West House upper drive. Eric had listed Vale Waters alone. The photographs showed the renovated kitchen, the screened porch, and the orange kayak stacked beside the garage. There were no pictures of Margaret's cottage or Arthur's bench. At the bottom of the listing, one sentence read, "Lake access available by established shared footpath, subject to residential use conditions." Margaret read it twice. It was accurate. It was also the first thing Eric had built around her, no instead of across it. The first buyers wanted to remove the pines. They stood on Eric's deck with a real estate agent and talked about opening the view, as if Margaret could not hear them from the path below. The woman imagined glass railings. The man wanted to know whether the shore parcel might be available once circumstances changed. Margaret continued clearing leaves from the channel. Their offer never came. The second buyers were investors who calculated how many weekends at peak rate would cover the mortgage. They liked the house, but disliked the residential use conditions on the footpath. What happens if guests want to launch kayaks? Their agent asked Margaret. They use the public landing. And events? Not on my path. Could quiet hours be flexible? They are quiet because they are not flexible. They did not make an offer either, Eric called that evening. You didn't have to sound so hostile. I answered their questions. You could have explained that the conditions are reasonable. People who find them reasonable don't need persuasion. They were prepared to pay close to asking. They did not offer. Because you made it sound like they'd be living beside a prison warden. Margaret looked at the keys hanging beside her door. For years, she had carried keys to every building on the shore and considered that freedom. Now she carried one house key and controlled the door it opened. Then find buyers who want a neighbor instead of an obstacle, she said. The house remained on the market through the first frost. Eric lowered the price once. He turned off the rental calendar so viewings could happen on short notice, which meant the house produced no income at all. Bennett Pump replaced the burned motor, the pressure switch, and a corroded section of pipe. Eric paid the bill without asking Margaret whether the charge looked fair. He came less often. When he did, he walked the upper drive rather than cutting past the cottage. He was not respecting her so much as avoiding her, but from a distance the two actions looked alike. Daniel spent Saturdays repairing the east house. Cal supervised the open walls and charged for every hour. Daniel complained about the bills, then paid them. He stopped work on the cosmetic renovation and used the returned fixture money for drainage, insulation, and a proper sump pump. Marissa chose plain white baseboards to replace the swollen ones. They cost half as much, she told Margaret. Do they still meet the wall? So far. Then you've discovered luxury. Daniel returned Arthur's wooden plane to the cottage one afternoon. Margaret found it on the kitchen table wrapped in the dish towel. I thought you wanted it, she said. I do. Then why is it here? He set a short board beside it. The edges were square, the surface smooth. 2 wooden brackets had already been attached underneath. A shelf, he said, for above your desk, if you want it. Margaret inspected the joints. One was slightly wider than the other. Cal let you do these? He made me do them twice. Only twice? 3 times. She held the shelf against the wall while Daniel stepped back. Higher, he said. It's my shelf. Right. Where do you want it? A little lower. He moved it lower. No, back. Daniel looked at her. You did this to Cal. He survived. They installed it above Arthur's desk. Margaret placed the saved college newspaper on it, framed between two simple pieces of glass. Eric's young face smiled out beside the headline about student entrepreneurs. Daniel read it. You kept that? He was proud. He's still proud. Yes. Neither of them said whether that was good. Daniel folded the dish towel around the plane. I should have understood what you gave up. Margaret sat in Arthur's desk chair. I didn't give it up so you would owe me forever. I know. I made a choice. But you both treated the choice as proof that I wanted less. Daniel gripped the plane with both hands. I thought, if you needed us someday, it would mean we'd been right. About the cottage, about you not being able to stay here. Margaret looked toward the repaired back step. Cal had added a handrail after the first freeze. She had objected to its appearance and used it every morning since. I may need you someday, she said. That does not make my life a mistake in advance. Daniel nodded. I don't know how to apologize without asking you to make me feel better, he said. Then don't ask. I'm sorry. She let the words remain uncomfortable. He did too. Before leaving, Daniel took the plane. Snow came early and stayed. Margaret hired a man with a plow to clear the cottage parking space and the upper end of the path. She paid him. Daniel cleared the lower stones after each storm, sometimes before she woke. He did not text photographs or mention his back afterward. Once, Margaret made him coffee. Once, she did not hear him leave. Friday dinners became Sunday lunches when darkness arrived before 5. Lena brought casseroles. Sheila brought gossip from rental houses Margaret had no responsibility for. June brought card games and cheated badly. Cal installed weather stripping, then stayed for pot roast. Margaret's knees hurt in the cold. Some mornings, grief arrived before she opened her eyes and sat on her chest until the room warmed. Arthur's mug remained on the highest shelf through Christmas. On New Year's morning, she took it down. She poured coffee into it, carried it to the desk, and read one of Eric's old college letters. He had complained about snow, laundry prices, and a roommate who borrowed socks. At the bottom, he had written, "Tell Dad, I'm fine. You can know I'm not." Margaret drank from the cracked side carefully. The mug did not break, neither did anything else. In February, a couple named Graham and Anita Cole viewed the West House. They arrived in practical boots and spent more time inspecting the basement than admiring the windows. Anita asked about the pump replacement. Graham tested the porch screens. Neither mentioned cutting trees. They found Margaret near Arthur's bench, shaking snow from the path marker. "Are you Mrs. Vale?" Anita asked. "Margaret. I'm Anita." "This is Graham. Eric said you own the path." "He said that?" "He was very clear." Margaret brushed snow from her gloves. Graham pointed toward the public landing. "We understand the house has walking access through here, but launches are from the landing." "Yes." "And no commercial events?" "Yes." "We don't host commercial events," Anita said. "We barely host dinner." Graham looked injured. "We hosted Thanksgiving. Your sister brought the food. She used our oven." They bickered with the ease of people who had survived themselves. Anita turned toward the West House. "We'd like to live here most of the year. Maybe rent it for a few weeks when we travel, if that doesn't create trouble. Renters can use the path if they respect the conditions." "That seems fair." They walked down to the water. Graham tested Arthur's bench before sitting, then asked Margaret whether she wanted help moving snow from beneath it. "It stays," she said. "So do the trees," Anita added, "if we buy." Their offer was below Eric's original asking price, and above the amount he needed to cover his consulting debt, the pump, and the remaining house loan. He would not recover everything he had spent. He accepted anyway. The closing took place in March. Margaret did not attend. She did not need to. The residential path conditions were recorded plainly with the sale because all three parties had agreed to them openly. No surprise appeared at the bottom of a page. No one discovered a forgotten right. Eric sold the house he owned, and Margaret continued owning what she had kept. He came to the cottage after signing. The ceramic rooster sat in a cardboard box beneath his arm. Arthur's red plaid jacket was folded on top. "I thought you might want this back," he said, lifting the rooster. "You made it. Dad kept it. So did you." Eric looked down at its missing wing. I don't know why. Not everything has to improve in value. He put it back in the box. For a while, they stood beneath the porch eave, listening to thaw water drip from the pines. The sale covers the business line, he said. Mostly. I'm glad. I lost money, I know. If you'd sold with us, no? He stopped. I know. It was the first time he said it without trying to move her afterward. Graham and Anita's car came down the upper drive. They were measuring windows for curtains and had called before visiting. Eric watched them unload. You like them? He said. I have met them twice. You let them use the path. They agreed to respect it. I could have agreed. You could have. He shifted the box. You chose strangers over your own family. Margaret looked at him. Beneath the anger, she could still see the frightened man who had stood in her cottage after the pump failed, drinking soup from Arthur's mug. No, she said. I stopped choosing family only when family meant being used. That's not what it meant to me. It was what it required from me. Eric looked toward the lake. Margaret softened her voice, but not the answer. You are my son. That does not make my home your inventory, my labor your backup plan, or my future something you can spend early. He swallowed. I don't know how to be around you now, he said. Come without needing something. His expression tightened, then eased. Maybe, he said. It was not reconciliation. It was not a promise. Margaret let it be the size it was. Eric carried the rooster, the jacket, and the rest of his box to his car. Before driving away, he stopped at the fork and straightened the west house marker, which winter frost had pushed slightly crooked. Graham and Anita moved in during April. They renamed nothing. Graham stored one canoe beside their garage and carried it to the public landing himself. Anita used the shore path in the mornings and sometimes sat with Margaret on Arthur's bench. They asked before inviting overnight guests. The trees remained. At the east house, Daniel and Marissa planted grass over the repaired drainage trench. Daniel checked the catch basin whenever rain was forecast. He did not announce this to Margaret, though she noticed the grate stayed clear. The first warm Friday brought everyone back beneath the pines. Margaret made soup. Lena brought cornbread. Sheila brought pickles. June brought criticism. Cal arrived with a new folding chair and placed it beside Margaret's. I have chairs, she said. You have traps made of wood. This one's ugly. Then nobody will steal it. Daniel and Marissa came down carrying the blue pitcher filled with branches. Graham and Anita brought bread from the village bakery. People moved along the path, greeting one another, carrying bowls, folding tables, and nothing Margaret had not invited them to carry. The cottage windows glowed behind her. Arthur's bench faced the darkening lake. His tool chest remained beneath the side window. His mug sat beside Margaret's place, holding coffee now, instead of pencils or grief. The two lake houses rose among the trees, each belonging to people responsible for what happened inside it. Margaret sat in the caretaker's chair, with one hand resting on the new rail Cal had built. Her knees ached. Eric's place at the table was empty. Neither fact vanished because the evening was beautiful. Cal handed her a bowl. You planning to feed all these people every Friday? He asked. Margaret looked down the shore path, worn smooth by people who knew whose home they were passing. No, she said. Next week they can feed me. Lena heard and raised her spoon. Finally. Laughter moved beneath the pines. Margaret took the bowl, warm between both hands, while the last light settled on the water and everyone she had chosen stayed.